Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Vincent Hawthorne. I'm 24 years old, and I've been a park ranger for 6 months now. This is my story. Well, it's supposed to be my story. I'm not sure anymore. I should start at the beginning. It was Halloween night, 1987, my first time working alone at Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. The other rangers thought it would be funny to give the rookie the Halloween shift. Nothing ever happens, they said. Just drive around, check the campsites, make sure nobody's causing trouble. I was excited, honestly. 6 months of training, 6 months of following other rangers around like a lost puppy. Finally, I got to prove I could handle things by myself. The radio crackled to life as I loaded my gear into the truck. Ranger 7, this is base. You copy? I grabbed the handset. This is Ranger 7. I copy base. Vincent, you got everything you need? Extra batteries for the flashlight? Maps? That was Sarah, the night dispatcher. She'd been working dispatch for 15 years. She knew these woods better than anyone. All set, Sarah. GPS is working, radio's clear, got my thermos of coffee. Good. Check in every 2 hours. And Vincent? Yeah? Stay on the main trails tonight. Weather's been weird lately. Animals are acting strange. I should have listened to that warning. I really should have. The Blackwater Falls area is beautiful during the day. Tall trees, clear streams, rocks that look like they've been there since the world began. But at night it's different. The shadows are deeper. The sounds are wrong. I started my patrol at 10 p.m. The first few hours were normal. I checked the camping areas, made sure nobody left fires burning, found a few beer cans that I picked up. Nothing unusual. But around midnight, my compass started spinning. I was driving down Trail 7, the same trail I'd driven dozens of times during training. I knew it by heart. But my compass was spinning like a top, round and round, never settling on any direction. I stopped the truck and tapped the compass face. Sometimes the old equipment got stuck, but it kept spinning. That's weird, I said to myself. I picked up the radio. Base, this is Ranger 7. My compass is acting up, spinning around like crazy. Static answered me. Then Sarah's voice came through. Say again, Ranger 7, your transmission was garbled. I said my compass is broken, won't stop spinning. Compass problems? Might be interference from the radio tower on Bear Mountain. Don't worry about it. Your GPS should work fine. But that was the thing. My GPS was working fine. According to the little green screen, I was exactly where I should be. Trail 7, mile marker 12. But my compass said I was going every direction at once. I kept driving. What else could I do? That's when I heard the howling. It wasn't like any animal I knew. Too deep for a coyote, too long for a wolf. And there weren't supposed to be any wolves in this part of West Virginia anyway. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the trees. I stopped the truck again and rolled down the window. The forest was quiet now, just the normal night sounds. Insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the wind, an owl somewhere in the distance. I picked up the radio again. Base, did you hear that howling just now? Negative, Ranger 7. Didn't hear anything unusual on your transmission. You okay out there? I listened to the recording later. Sarah was right. On the radio, you couldn't hear the howling at all. Just my voice and the normal forest sounds. But I heard it clear as day. Yeah, I'm fine. Just checking. But I wasn't fine. Something was wrong. The animals Sarah mentioned. I was starting to see what she meant. I hadn't seen a single deer all night. No rabbits running across the road. No raccoons digging through. GH trash cans at the campsites. It was like every animal in the forest had just left. I drove to the next checkpoint, a small parking area near Blackwater Creek. There was supposed to be a hiking group camping there. 3 college kids from Ohio. They'd registered at the ranger station that morning. Their car was there, a beat-up Honda with Ohio plates. But no tent, no campsite, just the car, sitting empty in the parking lot. I got out of my truck and called, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed back from the trees. No answer. I found their stuff scattered around a fire pit about 50 yards from the parking area. Sleeping bags, backpacks, camping gear, a pot of beans still sitting over the fire. The beans were still warm beans. That meant they'd been here recently, maybe just a few minutes ago. But where were they? I called out again. "This is Ranger Hawthorne with the Forest Service. If anyone's out there, please respond." Nothing. I should have called it in right then. Should have followed procedure. But I was new, and I didn't want to look like I couldn't handle a simple situation. Maybe they'd just gone for a night hike. Maybe they'd be back soon. I walked around the campsite looking for clues. That's when I saw the marks on the trees. Long scratches in the bark. 4 parallel lines like claw marks. But they were 12 feet off the ground. What animal could make marks that high up? A bear, maybe. Bears could stand on their back legs. But these marks were too clean, too precise, and too high even for a bear. I took out my flashlight and followed the scratches from tree to tree. They led away from the campsite, deeper into the forest. Each set of marks was exactly the same. 4 parallel lines, always 12 feet up, like something was marking its territory, or leaving a trail. I followed those claw marks for about a quarter mile. They went straight through the forest, tree to tree, like whatever made them never touch the ground. My radio squawked. "Ranger 7, time for your check-in." I'd completely forgotten about the 2-hour check-in. I looked at my watch, 2 a.m. already. "Base, this is Ranger 7, found an abandoned campsite at Blackwater Creek. 3 campers, but no sign of them. Their car's still here. Food's still warm." "Copy that. Did you check the trails? Maybe they went for a night hike." "I'm following some kind of trail now. There are strange marks on the trees." "What kind of marks?" I looked up at the scratches above my head. In the flashlight beam, they looked even deeper than before. "Claw marks, I think, really high up, about 12 feet off the ground. Probably a bear marking territory. Black bears do that sometimes." "Any sign of where the campers went?" "Not yet. I'm going to keep looking." "Vincent, don't go too far from your truck. If they're lost, they'll probably come back to their car eventually." Sarah was right. That was the smart thing to do. But something was pulling me forward. Those marks on the trees seemed to be leading somewhere, and I had to know where. "I'll be careful," I said into the radio. I kept walking. The marks continued, tree after tree. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but it felt like the forest was closing in around me. The trees seemed taller, the shadows deeper. That's when I heard the footsteps. Behind me, slow and heavy. Step, step, step. I stopped and turned around. My flashlight showed nothing but trees and darkness. The footsteps stopped too. I started walking again. Step, step, step. The footsteps started again behind me, matching my pace exactly. I spun around fast, sweeping my flashlight in a wide circle. "Who's there?" Nothing, just forest. But I could feel something watching me, eyes in the darkness, just beyond the reach of my light. I backed up against a tree and grabbed my radio. "Base, this is Ranger 7. I think someone's following me." Static. Then Sarah's voice, fuzzy and distant. "Ranger 7, you're breaking up. Say again." "Someone's following me. I can hear footsteps." "Vincent, are you sure? Could be an echo. Sound carries weird in the forest at night." As she spoke, I heard them again. The footsteps. But this time they were coming from my left, then my right, then behind me again. Whatever was out there was moving around me in a circle. "Base, I need backup. Something's not right out here." "Vincent, your transmission is full of static. I can barely hear you. Try changing your position." I moved to a small clearing where the radio reception might be better. As soon as I stepped into the open space, the footsteps stopped. The forest went completely quiet. No insects, no wind, no owl, nothing. That's when I saw it. At the edge of my flashlight beam, just for a second. Something tall, much taller than a person. It ducked behind a tree so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. But I'd seen enough. Long arms, dark fur, and those eyes. Human-like eyes, but bigger. Watching me with intelligence. I ran. I crashed through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes, rocks tripping me up. Behind me, I could hear something crashing through the trees too. Something big, keeping pace with me easily. It was playing with me. I realized that as I ran. It could have caught me any time it wanted, but it was staying just behind me, just out of sight. I made it back to the campsite, gasping and sweating. The missing camper's gear was still there. The fire was still burning. But now, there was something else. One of the sleeping bags was torn open, not unzipped. Torn. Long rips in the fabric like it had been shredded by claws. And there was blood. Dark stains on the torn fabric. I grabbed my radio with shaking hands. "Base, this is Ranger 7. Emergency. I found blood at the campsite. The campers might be hurt." "Ranger 7, I can barely hear you. Did you say you found the campers?" "No! Blood! There's blood on their sleeping bag!" But even as I said it, I knew she couldn't hear me clearly. The radio kept cutting in and out. I looked around the campsite again. The fire was still burning, but low. We're now. The pot of beans had cooled off. And there, at the edge of the firelight, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Footprints in the dirt. Human footprints, but wrong. Too long, too wide. With what looked like claw marks at the ends. The prints led away from the campsite toward the dense forest. But there were only 2 sets. 3 campers, but only 2 sets of prints. Where was the third person? I followed the prints with my flashlight. They led to a large oak tree about 30 yards from the fire. At the base of the tree, I found a backpack. College textbooks spilled out of it. A wallet with an Ohio driver's license. Michael Chen, age 20. I looked up into the tree. High up in the branches, something was hanging. At first, I thought it was camping gear. A sleeping bag, maybe. Then I realized what it was. Michael Chen was hanging in the tree 40 feet off the ground. His body was twisted in an impossible way. His clothes were shredded. And his face was gone. I threw up right there at the base of the tree. When I was done, I grabbed the radio again. "Base! Base! I found one of the campers. He's dead. Something killed him and put him in a tree." This time the radio was clear. Sarah's voice came through loud and strong. "Vincent, calm down. What did you find?" "Michael Chen, one of the college kids. He's dead. Something tore him apart and hung him in a tree 40 feet up." "Vincent, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" I looked up at the body again. In the moonlight, it looked even worse. "I'm sure." "Okay. I'm calling the sheriff and the state police. Don't touch anything. Don't move anything. Just wait for backup." "Sarah, there's something else out here, something big. It was following me." "Vincent, you're in shock. Just get back to your truck and wait. Help is coming." But as I walked back toward my truck, I knew help wouldn't come in time. Whatever killed Michael Chen was still out there, and it knew exactly where I was. I could feel it watching me from the darkness, waiting. I made it back to my truck, but I didn't feel safe. Whatever was out there had just killed a person and hung his body 40 feet up in a tree like it was hanging laundry. I sat in the driver's seat with the doors locked and the engine running. The headlights cut through the darkness, but they only made the shadows beyond them look deeper. My radio crackled. "Ranger 7, this is Base. Sheriff's Department is en route. ETA about 40 minutes. 40 minutes. That felt like forever. "Copy that, Base. I'll wait here." But I couldn't just sit still. I kept thinking about the other 2 campers. Michael Chen was dead. But what about his friends? Were they still alive out there? I got out of the truck and walked back to the campsite. Maybe I could find some clue about where they'd gone. The fire had burned down to glowing coals. I threw some more wood on it to brighten the area. As the flames grew higher, I saw something I'd missed before. There was a message written in the dirt near the fire pit. Scratched letters, like someone had used a stick to write in the ground. "Help us." Fresh scratches in the dirt. Recent. I looked around the campsite again. That's when I noticed the sounds. Voices. Faint voices calling from somewhere in the forest. "Help! Somebody help us!" It sounded like young people, a man and a woman, calling for help. The other two campers. They were still alive. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the voices. "This is Ranger Hawthorne. Where are you?" "Over here. We're trapped. Please help us." The voices were coming from deeper in the forest, past where I'd found Michael's body. I followed them, moving as fast as I could through the trees. "Keep calling," I shouted. "I'm coming. Help, over here." But something was wrong. The voices sounded strange, too clear, too perfect, like they were being played from a recording. I stopped walking and listened more carefully. "Help! Somebody help us!" The exact same words, the exact same tone, like someone was pressing a button and playing the same recording over and over. A chill ran down my spine. Those weren't the campers calling for help. It was something else. Something that had learned their voices. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any noise. But as I moved, the voices followed me. "Over here. We're trapped." The voices were coming from above me now, from the trees. I looked up and saw shapes moving through the branches. Dark shapes, too big to be human, swinging from tree to tree like giant apes. But they weren't apes. They were something else entirely. "Please help us." The voice came from directly above my head. I looked up and saw it clearly for the first time. It was massive, at least 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur, arms that reached almost to the ground. But the face was the worst part. It looked almost human. Intelligent eyes, a mouth that could form words. But the teeth were all wrong. Too many teeth, too sharp, and it was smiling at me. "Help," it said, in a perfect imitation of a young woman's voice. "Please help us." I ran again. This time I didn't care about being quiet. I crashed through the forest, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly as branches tore at my clothes. Behind me the voices followed. But now there were more of them. "Help us!" "Over here. Please, somebody!" Different voices now. Not just the two campers. Other voices I didn't recognize. Older voices. Men and women of different ages. How many people had this thing killed? How many voices had it learned? I made it back to my truck, gasping and sweating. I locked the doors and grabbed the radio. Base, are you there? Ranger 7, this is Base. What's your status?" "Sarah, listen to me carefully. The missing campers aren't just lost. Something killed them. Something that can imitate human voices." Silence on the rats. "Dio." Then Sarah's voice came back, sounding concerned. "Vincent, you're not making sense. Did you find the other two campers?" "No. They're dead too, I think. But something out here is using their voices to try to trick me." "Vincent, are you hurt? Did you hit your head?" I realized how crazy I sounded, but I had to make her understand. "Sarah, how long have you been working dispatch?" 15 years. "Why?" "In 15 years, have you ever heard of anything like this? Animals that can talk, that can imitate human voices?" A long pause. Then Sarah's voice came back, quieter than before. "Vincent, there have been stories over the years, rangers who reported strange things, but never anything confirmed." "What kind of stories?" "Missing hikers, bodies found in impossible places, animals that seemed too smart, too organized. But the official reports always blamed bears or getting lost." "Official reports?" "Vincent, listen to me. If what you're saying is true, you need to get out of there, right now. Don't wait for backup." But as she spoke, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Voices outside my truck. Multiple voices, all calling for help. But they weren't random voices anymore. They were specific. "Vincent, help me!" That was my supervisor's voice, Tom Bradley, calling my name. But Tom was supposed to be home with his family tonight. He wasn't even working. "Vincent, I'm hurt. I need help." The voice was coming from the passenger side of my truck. I turned to look, and there was something pressed against the window. A face. Tom's face. But wrong. The features were too stretched, like someone had made a mask of Tom's face, and it didn't fit quite right. "Let me in, Vincent. I'm hurt." I started the truck and hit the gas. The thing fell away from the window as I drove off, but I could hear it laughing behind me. Not a human laugh. Something deeper. Something hungry. I drove back toward the main road, but my headlights showed something impossible. Tom Bradley was standing in the middle of the road, waving at me to stop, but I'd just seen Tom's face at my window. And this Tom looked perfect. Exactly like my supervisor should look. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window just a crack. "Tom? What are you doing here?" "Vincent, thank God. I got worried when you didn't check in. Sarah sent me to find you." That made sense. Tom cared about his rangers. If something was wrong, he'd come looking. But something in my gut told me not to trust it. "Tom, what's my middle name?" He smiled. "Come on, Vincent. This isn't time for games. Get out of the truck. We need to talk about what you found." I'd worked with Tom for 6 months. He knew my middle name was James. We'd talked about it during training because we both had the same middle name. This thing wearing Tom's face didn't know that. I hit the gas and drove straight at it. At the last second, it jumped aside with impossible speed. In my rearview mirror, I saw it watching me go, still wearing Tom's face, still smiling. I drove as fast as I dared on the winding forest roads. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. In my radio, I could hear Sarah trying to reach me. "Ranger 7, please respond. Vincent, are you there?" I picked up the handset. "Sarah, I'm here. I'm driving back to the main station." "Good. Tom went out to find you. Did you see him?" My stomach dropped. "Sarah, what did Tom look like when he left?" "What do you mean? What did he look like?" "He looked like Tom." "Why? Was he wearing his uniform? His ranger hat?" "Vincent, you're scaring me. Yes, he was in uniform. What's going on?" The thing I'd seen in the road was wearing a perfect Forest Service uniform. Even the badges were in the right places. "Sarah, I don't think that was Tom." Static filled the radio. When Sarah's voice came back, it sounded different, worried. "Vincent, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tom Bradley died 2 hours ago." The truck sweeper served as those words hit me. "What?" "His wife called the station. She found him in their backyard. Something had attacked him. She thought it was a bear at first, but the state police are calling it suspicious death now. Tom was dead, had been dead for 2 hours. But I'd just seen him, talked to him, looked right into his eyes." "Sarah, if Tom's dead, then what did I just see?" "I don't know, Vincent, but you need to get back here right now." I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The forest flew by outside my windows, dark trees reaching across the road like they were trying to grab my truck. That's when my radio started acting up again. "Vincent!" The voice sounded like Sarah, but with static underneath. "Vincent, can you hear me?" "I'm here, Sarah." "Vincent, I need you to turn around and go back to the campsite." I slowed down. That didn't sound right. Why would I go back there? "We found the other 2 campers. They're alive, but they're hurt. You need to help them." "Sarah, you just told me Tom was dead and to get back to the station. Now you want me to go back?" "Vincent, I never said anything about Tom. Are you feeling okay? Maybe you should pull over and rest." Something was very wrong. I'd just talked to Sarah about Tom's death. She'd been worried about me. Now she was talking like none of that had happened. "Sarah, what's my badge number?" Silence on the radio. Then the voice came back, still sounding like Sarah, but somehow empty. "Vincent, you're not making sense. Just come back to the campsite. The campers need your help." "What's my badge number, Sarah?" More silence. Then a different voice came over the radio, a voice I recognized, my own voice. "Base, this is Ranger 7. Everything's fine out here. Found the campers. They're all okay. Just a misunderstanding." But I wasn't talking. I was listening to my own voice on the radio, saying things I'd never said. "Vincent?" The fake Sarah voice was back. "Vincent, why aren't you responding?" I turned off the radio. Whatever was out there had learned to copy voices perfectly. Not just the sound, but somehow the radio frequencies too. It was using the radio system against me. I was completely cut off. No way to call for help. No way to know if anyone I talked to was real. I kept driving toward the main station, but my headlights showed something that made me slam on the brakes. There was a roadblock ahead. 2 police cars with their lights flashing. Officers standing in the road, waving at me to stop. But something was wrong with the scene. The police cars were too clean, too perfect, like they'd just rolled off a showroom floor. And the officers? They all looked exactly the same. Same height, same build, same face, like someone had made multiple copies of the same person. I put the truck in reverse, but when I looked in my rearview mirror, there were more police cars behind me. I was trapped. One of the officers walked up to my driver's side window. He tapped on the glass with his flashlight. "Sir, we need you to step out of the vehicle." His voice sounded normal, professional, but his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too interested. "What seems to be the problem, officer?" "We're investigating reports of a dangerous animal in the area. We need to evacuate all civilians." That almost sounded reasonable. But I noticed he called me a civilian, not a ranger, and I was wearing my Forest Service uniform. "I'm Ranger Vincent Hawthorne. This is my jurisdiction." The officer smiled. "Too wide. Too many teeth." "Of course you are. Please step out of the vehicle so we can escort you to safety." Behind him, the other officers were moving closer to my truck. They all had that same too wide smile. I gunned the engine and drove straight at the roadblock. The fake police officers scattered, but not like humans would. They moved too fast, too smoothly, like they were floating. In my mirrors, I could see them chasing my truck. But they weren't running on the road. They were running through the trees alongside the road, keeping pace with my truck easily. What were these things, and how many of them were there? I made it to the main ranger station, but it was dark. All the lights were off, which was wrong. The station was supposed to be staffed 24 hours a day. I parked in front of the building and sat in my truck for a moment, trying to think. My radio was compromised. The phone lines might be too. And I didn't know who I could trust. But I needed help. I needed backup. I needed someone to believe what I'd seen. I got out of the truck and walked to the front door of the station. It was unlocked, which was also wrong. We always kept the doors locked at night. Inside, the station was quiet. Too quiet. No radio chatter. No sounds from the dispatch room. "Hello? Sarah? Anyone here?" My voice echoed in the empty building. I walked to the dispatch room. Sarah's chair was empty, but her coffee cup was still warm. A half-eaten sandwich sat on her desk. She'd left recently. But where had she gone? I tried the phone. No dial tone. The line was dead. I was completely cut off from the outside world. No radio, no phone, no backup coming. That's when I heard the voices outside. Multiple voices, all calling my name. "Vincent! Vincent, we need help! Vincent, open the door!" I looked out the window and saw them. Dozens of people standing in the parking lot. But I recognized some of the faces. Tom Bradley was there, the 3 college campers. Other people I didn't recognize, but who all looked somehow familiar. And they were all looking at me with those 2 bright eyes, all smiling with too many teeth. "Vincent!" they called in perfect unison. "Come outside, we want to talk to you." I backed away from the window. How many people had these things killed? How long had this been going on? That's when I found the files. In Tom's office, there was a filing cabinet marked Classified Unusual Incidents. I'd never seen it before. Tom had never mentioned it. Inside were dozens of reports going back 20 years, missing hikers, bodies found in Sybil places, witnesses reporting creatures that could talk, that could imitate human voices. And every report had the same ending. Cause of death determined to be bear attack. Case closed. There was a pattern. Every few months, someone would disappear. The official cause was always animal attack or getting lost, but the witness statements told a different story. Creatures that walked upright, creatures that hunted in packs, creatures that learned human voices and used them to hunt. At the bottom of the pile, I found a memo from the state office. It was addressed to all ranger stations in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Eerie, Containment Protocol for Unusual Predator Activity. All reports of bipedal predator sightings are to be classified immediately. Witnesses are to be debriefed and sworn to confidentiality. Official cause of death for all related fatalities will be listed as bear attack. Under no circumstances are these incidents to be reported to federal authorities or the media. This species is believed to be highly intelligent and adaptive. Direct confrontation should be avoided. If containment fails, implement broken arrow protocol. Broken arrow protocol. I'd heard that term before, but in military context. It meant a nuclear weapon was loose or missing. What did it mean here? Outside, the voices were getting louder, more insistent. Vincent, we know you're in there. Vincent, we just want to help you. Vincent, open the door. But now there were other voices too. Voices I recognized from the radio. Ranger 7, this is base. Please respond. That was Sarah's voice. But Sarah was gone. Vincent, this is your mother. Please call home. My mother lived in Ohio. She'd never been to this station. They were learning. Getting better at copying voices. Maybe they'd been listening to radio transmissions for years, learning how people talked, how they behaved. I looked out the window again. There had to be 50 of them now, all standing in the parking lot, all staring at the station, all waiting for me to come outside. I barricaded myself in the communications room. It was the most secure part of the station, with thick walls and only one door. If I was going to make a last stand, this was the place to do it. Outside, I could hear them testing the building, rattling doors, tapping on windows, trying to find a way in. But they weren't just mindlessly attacking. They were being smart about it, methodical. These things were intelligent, maybe more intelligent than humans. I found the emergency radio in the communications room. It ran on a different frequency from the regular radios, and it had more power. Maybe I could reach someone outside the area. Maybe I could warn people. I turned it on and tried to reach anyone who would listen. This is Ranger Vincent Hawthorne at Monongahela National Forest. Emergency broadcast. Can anyone hear me? Static answered me. Then a voice I recognized. My own voice. This is Ranger Vincent Hawthorne. Everything is fine here. Disregard any emergency broadcasts. They were monitoring the emergency frequency too. Somehow they'd learned to use our own communication systems against us. But I had to try. People needed to know what was out there. This is the real Vincent Hawthorne. There are creatures in the forest. They can imitate human voices perfectly. They've been killing people for years. Don't trust anyone who tries to lead you into the woods. This is Ranger Hawthorne, my own voice said over the radio. Please disregard the previous transmission. The ranger in question has suffered a mental breakdown due to stress. I'm not crazy, I shouted into the radio. These things are real. They killed Tom Bradley. They killed the campers. They're wearing people's faces. But even as I said it, I realized how insane it sounded. Who would believe a story like this? That's when I heard the sound of breaking glass. They were coming in through the windows. I could hear them moving throughout the station. Multiple sets of footsteps, too heavy to be human. And voices, lots of voices, all talking at once. Vincent, where are you? Vincent, we want to help you. Vincent, everything's going to be okay. The voices of every person they'd killed over the years. Men, women, children, all calling my name. The footsteps stopped outside the communications room door. Vincent? It was Tom's voice. Vincent, it's me. Open the door. Tom's dead, I said. Vincent, I'm hurt. I need medical attention. Please. The door handle rattled. Vincent, this is your mother. Open the door right now, young man. My mother's voice, exactly as I remembered it, stern but loving. The voice that had tucked me in at night when I was a kid. But my mother was 300 miles away. Vincent, another voice said. Sarah's voice. Vincent, I'm scared. There's something out there. Please let me in. That almost got me. Sarah sounded genuinely frightened, like she was in real danger. But I'd seen the files. I knew the truth. Sarah was probably already dead. The door shook as something heavy hit it from the other side. Then again, the wood around the lock started to splinter. I grabbed the emergency radio one more time. This is Vincent Hawthorne. Final transmission. The creatures in Monongahela National Forest are real. They've been hunting people for decades. They can perfectly imitate human voices and appearances. Don't trust anyone who tries to lead you into isolated areas. Don't trust... The door exploded inward. They poured into the room like a dark wave, massive shapes covered in fur but walking upright like humans. Their eyes glowed in the dim light from the radio equipment. And their faces, they kept changing. First Tom's face, then Sarah's, then my mother's, cycling through every person they'd killed. "Hello, Vincent," they said in unison, using all their stolen voices at once. It sounded like a chorus from hell. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They surrounded me, their massive hands reaching out. The last thing I remember clearly was being lifted off the ground. The radio was still on, and I could hear my own voice coming through the speaker. "This is Ranger Vincent Hawthorne. Everything is normal at Monongahela Station. All personnel are accounted for. Ending patrol." But I wasn't the one talking. My name is Catherine Redhart, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 18 years. Before that, I was a police detective in Charlotte for 12 years. I've seen dead bodies, crime scenes, and things that would make most people sick. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. 6 months ago, I transferred to the Clingman's Dome area. My captain said I needed a break after the Henderson case went bad. 3 kids dead, killer never found. I couldn't sleep anymore. The mountains seemed like a good place to start over. The funny thing is, I chose this area for a reason I couldn't explain. Something kept pulling me here. Maybe it was because my sister Emma disappeared near here 20 years ago. She was camping with friends, and they found her tent torn apart. No body, no real answers. The local sheriff said it was probably a bear attack. I never believed that. My first few months were quiet. I checked on campers, helped lost hikers, filed reports about raccoons getting into trash cans. Normal stuff. The other rangers were nice enough. They called me detective as a joke, but not in a mean way. The mountains were beautiful, especially in early fall. The leaves were changing colors, and tourists came to see them. I liked the peaceful work. I liked being outside. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Then the reports started coming in. It began with campers complaining about strange sounds at night, growling that didn't sound like any animal they knew. One family said something big had walked around their tent for hours, but when they looked outside in the morning, there were no tracks. I told them it was probably just a black bear. We have lots of bears in the Smokies. They get curious about human food and camps. Nothing unusual about that. But then Jake Morrison, a hiker from Tennessee, came to the ranger station, shaking like a EF. He said he saw something in the woods that wasn't right, something that looked like a bear at first, but then stood up on 2 legs like a person. When I asked him how much he'd been drinking, he got mad and left. I should have listened to him. More reports came in over the next few weeks, always the same basic story. Something big in the woods, something that moved wrong, something that felt like it was watching people. I started carrying my old service weapon again, even though park rules said I didn't need it. Old habits, I guess. Once a cop, always a cop. The first real evidence came on a Tuesday morning in late September. A family camping near Elkmont called in a disturbance. When I got there, their campsite looked like a tornado had hit it. Tents were shredded. Coolers were torn open and scattered. But the family was fine. They'd spent the night in their car after hearing something circling their camp. That's when I saw the tracks. They started as bear paws in the soft dirt near the creek. Big ones, bigger than any black bear I'd seen, but as I followed them, they changed. The paw prints became longer, more like hands. By the time they reached the torn tents, they looked almost human. But no human has claws that long. I took pictures and measurements. I bagged some hair samples from the tent fabric. I did everything by the book, just like I'd learned as a detective. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be a normal case. That night, I called my old partner in Charlotte. "Hey, Rick, it's Catherine. I need you to run some DNA tests for me off the books." "Cat? You okay up there in the mountains? You sound worried. Just run the tests, okay? I'll owe you one. You already owe me 12, but who's counting? Send me what you got. I hung up and stared at the evidence bags on my kitchen table. The hair samples were coarse and dark, but they had an oily feeling that didn't seem right for bare fur. And the smell, it was like wet dog mixed with something rotten. I opened a beer and tried to think like a detective again. What did I know for toss? Sure. Something big was in these woods. Something that scared experienced campers and hikers. Something that left tracks that changed from animal to almost human. Something that destroyed campsites but didn't hurt people. Yet. The word yet kept echoing in my head as I went to bed that night. I double-checked my locks and kept my gun on the nightstand. Old habits again. I dreamed about Emma that night. She was standing at the edge of the woods, calling my name. But when I tried to reach her, she backed away into the trees. In the dream, something was following her. Something big and dark that I couldn't quite see. I woke up at 3:33 a.m. in a cold sweat. Outside my cabin, something howled in the distance. It wasn't a wolf. We don't have wolves in the Smokies. It wasn't a coyote either. It was something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like it was calling my name. The DNA results came back 3 days later. Rick called me early in the morning and I could hear the confusion in his voice. Kat, what exactly did you send me? Hair samples from a possible bear attack on a campsite. Why? Because this isn't bear hair. It's not from any animal I can identify. The lab tech said it has some similarities to human hair, but the protein structure is all wrong. Where did you really get this? I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. I told you, a torn-up campsite near Elkmont. Catherine, listen to me. This sample matches DNA from 3 unsolved cases in North Carolina. Cases going back 40 years. How is that possible? My coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. What cases? Animal attacks, campers, hikers. The DNA was on file as unknown predator. The oldest case is from 1956. 1956, the year Emma disappeared. Rick, I need you to send me everything you have on those cases. Kat, are you sure you want to? Send it, today. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up broken coffee mug pieces and trying not to think about what this meant. DNA doesn't lie. Whatever was in these woods had been here for at least 40 years, and it had killed people. The files arrived by email that afternoon. I printed everything and spread it across my kitchen table like I used to do with murder cases. Photos, witness statements, coroner reports, evidence logs, the works. The pattern was clear once I laid it all out. Every 20 years, like clockwork. 1936, 1956, 1976, 1996. Each time the attacks happened in October. Each time the victims were found torn apart near Civil War battlefield sites. Each time the DNA was identical. I grabbed a map of the Smokies and started marking locations. Chickamauga Creek in 1936. Cataract Falls in 1956, where Emma disappeared. Klingman's Dome in 1976. Deep Creek in 1996. All of them were sites where Confederate soldiers had died during the Civil War. I knew because I'd grown up hearing the stories. This whole area was soaked in blood from battles that happened over 150 years ago. And now it was 2016, 20 years after the last attack. I was still staring at the map when my radio crackled to life. Ranger Redhart, we have a situation at Cataract Falls. Missing hiker, Tom Bradley, age 34. His girlfriend says he went for a walk around sunset yesterday and never came back. Cataract Falls, where Emma disappeared. I'm on my way. The drive took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. By the time I got there, it was getting dark. The missing hiker's girlfriend, Sarah, was sitting in a Park Service truck wrapped in a blanket. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. He just went for a short walk, she kept saying. Just to take some pictures of the waterfall. We were supposed to drive home tonight. I got the basics from Ranger Martinez, who'd taken the initial report. Tom Bradley was an experienced hiker from Georgia. He'd been coming to the Smokies for years, not the type to get lost or do something stupid. "Any tracks?" I asked. "Some boot prints near the trail, but they disappear at the creek. We've got a search team coming in the morning." I nodded, but I had a bad feeling we wouldn't find Tom Bradley alive. Not here, not during the 20th year. "I'm going to take a quick look around before it gets too dark." "Want backup?" "No, I'll be fine. Just keep an eye on the girlfriend." I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the trail toward the waterfall. The air was thick and humid, and fog was starting to roll in from the creek. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking into something I didn't want to find. The waterfall was about a quarter-mile down a steep, rocky path. During the day, it was beautiful. At twilight, with fog swirling around the trees, it looked like something from a nightmare. I found Tom Bradley's camera first. It was lying in the creek, water damaged but still intact. The lens was cracked, and there was something dark on the camera strap that looked like blood. That's when I heard the growling. It was low and deep, coming from somewhere across the creek. I pulled out my flashlight and swept the beam across the water. The light caught something moving in the trees. Something big. "Hello?" I called out, knowing it was stupid but unable to stop myself. "Tom, is that you?" The growling stopped. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the sound of water falling over rocks. Then I heard branches breaking, like something heavy was moving through the forest, moving toward me. I unholstered my weapon and backed toward the trail. Every instinct I'd learned as a cop was screaming at me to get out of there, but I couldn't leave without Tom. "Tom Bradley, if you can hear me, call out." The answer came from right across the creek. But it wasn't Tom's voice. It was a howl that started low and rose to a pitch that made my teeth ache. It sounded like pain and rage and hunger all mixed together. Its sound, like something that had been waiting a very long time. I ran. I crashed back up the trail, stumbling over roots and rocks in the dark. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran, creating crazy shadows that looked like claws reaching for me. Behind me, I could hear something crashing through the brush. Something big, something fast, something gaining on me. I made it to the parking area just as my legs gave out. I fell hard on the gravel, scraping my hands and knees. When I looked back toward the trail, I saw two yellow eyes watching me from the tree line. They were too high off the ground to belong to any normal animal, and they looked intelligent. The eyes watched me for maybe 10 seconds, then disappeared back into the forest. I sat on the ground, breathing hard and trying not to throw up. My radio was crackling with Martinez asking for my status, but I couldn't make my voice work. When I finally stood up and walked back to the truck, Sarah looked at me with desperate hope. "Did you find him? Did you find Tom?" I looked at her scared face and lied. "Not yet, but we'll keep looking." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat at my kitchen table with Tom Bradley's camera and the case files, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The camera's memory card was damaged, but I managed to pull off a few images. Most were normal pictures of the waterfall and surrounding forest, but the last photo made my blood run cold. It showed Tom Bradley standing near the creek, smiling at the camera. But behind him, barely visible in the shadows between the trees, was a dark shape. Something tall and hunched over, with what looked like claws instead of hands. Something that had been watching him. We found Tom Bradley's body the next morning. What was left of it. The search team found Tom at first light, about a mile downstream from where I'd heard the growling. I got there just as the coroner was zipping up the body bag, but not before I saw what had been done to him. I'd seen bear attacks before. This wasn't one. Tom had been torn apart with a precision that suggested intelligence. His body was arranged in a specific pattern, like some kind of ritual. The trees around him were marked with claw scratches that formed symbols I didn't recognize. But the worst part was his face. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was frozen in a scream. Whatever had killed him, he'd seen it coming. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the county coroner, pulled me aside as they loaded the body into the van. "Catherine, I need to ask you something. Have you seen anything like this before?" "What do you mean?" "The claw marks. the way the body was positioned. I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never seen animal behavior like this. It's almost like what? Like whatever did this was trying to send a message. I thought about the yellow eyes watching me from the forest and nodded. What kind of message? I don't know, but I'm going to run every test I can think of. Maybe the lab can tell us something. The news about Tom Bradley's death spread quickly through the local community. By that afternoon, I had 3 more families canceling their camping reservations. Word was getting out that something dangerous was in the woods. My supervisor, Chief Ranger Davis, called me into his office that evening. Catherine, I need to know what you think we're dealing with here. I'd been dreading this conversation. How do you tell your boss that a shape-shifting creature has been killing people in his park for 80 years? I think we have a predator problem. Something big and aggressive. Black bear? Maybe. Or something else. Davis frowned. The state wildlife officials think it might be a rogue bear that's lost its fear of humans. They want to set traps. I knew traps wouldn't work. Whatever was out there was too smart for that, but I couldn't say that without sounding crazy. That might be a good idea. In the meantime, I'm closing the backcountries, camping areas. Day hikers only, and they have to be off the trails by sunset. It was a smart move, but I didn't think it would help. This thing had been patient for 20 years. It could wait a little longer. That night, I drove to the Cherokee Reservation east of the park. I'd heard there was an elder there named Joseph Crow Feather who knew the old stories about the mountains. If anyone could help me understand what I was dealing with, it would be him. I found him sitting on the porch of a small house near the casino. He was old, maybe 80, with long gray hair and hands like leather. He looked at me with dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You're the ranger," he said before I could introduce myself. "You're looking for answers about the Shadow Walker." Shadow Walker? That's what my grandfather called it, the thing that feeds on pain and death, the thing that was born from the battlefield. I sat down on the porch steps. "How long have you known about it?" "My family has been keeping watch for over a century. Every 20 years it wakes up hungry. Every 20 years it takes someone." "Why 20 years?" Joseph Crowfeather was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you know what happened at Klingman's Dome during the war? Some kind of battle? 400 Confederate soldiers died there in one day. Not in a battle. They were trapped by Union forces and slaughtered. Their bodies were thrown into a mass grave without ceremony, without respect." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And you think that created, what, some kind of spirit?" "Not a spirit. Something worse. All that rage and pain and fear, it had to go somewhere. It soaked into the ground, into the trees, into the very air. Over time, it took shape. Shape of what? Whatever it needs to be, bear, wolf, man. It feeds on trauma, grows stronger from violence, and every 20 years, when the barrier between worlds is thinnest, it hunts." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo from Tom Bradley's camera. Joseph looked at it for a long time, then handed the phone back. "You shouldn't have come here alone." "What do you mean?" "It knows you're investigating. It's been watching you since the day you arrived. You carry the scent of old pain. Your sister, yes? The Shadow Walker can smell grief like blood in the water." My hands started shaking. "How do you know about Emma?" "Because it took her to, 20 years ago. And now it wants to finish what it started." I stood up quickly. There has to be a way to stop it. Joseph shook his head. "Many have tried. The Shadow Walker is patient and clever. It learns from each encounter, gets stronger with each feeding. The only way to survive is to leave these mountains and never come back. I can't do that. Then you're going to die, just like your sister, just like all the others." I drove back to my cabin feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. But I also felt something else, determination. I'd spent my whole career as a detective and ranger protecting people. I wasn't about to stop now. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research. I read everything I could find about the Civil War battles in the area. I studied Cherokee folklore about spirits and monsters. I even called some professors at the university who specialized in Southern history. The pattern became clearer the more I learned. Every major battlefield in the Smokies had stories of supernatural encounters. Ghosts, strange animals, unexplained deaths. But the Clingman's Dome area was different. The stories there were darker, more violent, more real. I also started preparing for what I knew was coming. I cleaned and loaded every weapon I owned. I bought supplies, rope, flares, camping gear, first aid kit. I left detailed notes about my investigation in a safe deposit box, just in case. Because I was starting to understand that this thing hadn't just been killing random hikers for 80 years. It had been and building up to something, working toward a specific goal. And that goal involved me. The dream started on October 10th. Every night, I saw Emma standing at the edge of the forest, calling my name. But now I could see what was behind her in the shadows. Something tall and dark with yellow eyes and claws like knives. In the dreams, it spoke to me in a voice like grinding bones. Soon. On October 11th, I found fresh tracks outside my cabin. They started as bear paws in the garden, became more human-like by the front door, then disappeared entirely on the porch. Like whatever made them had simply vanished into thin air. On October 12th, every animal in the forest went quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Just silence. Even my neighbors noticed it. Mrs. Patterson, who lived a half-mile down the road, called to ask if I thought a storm was coming. I knew it wasn't a storm. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat in my living room with my service weapon in my lap and waited. The silence outside was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. At 3:33 a.m., something knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks, like a polite visitor. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years. "Catherine? It's me. It's Emma." I stared at the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The voice was perfect, exactly how Emma sounded when we were kids. Sweet and innocent, with that little laugh she always had at the end of her sentences. "Catherine, please, I'm hurt. I need help." Every instinct I'd developed as a cop was screaming at me not to open that door. But it sounded so much like Emma. What if somehow, impossibly, she was still alive? What if she'd been lost in the woods for 20 years and had finally found her way home? "Emma?" I whispered. "Yes, oh God, Catherine, please open the door. Something's been chasing me." I stood up slowly, keeping the gun in my hand, and through the peephole, I could see a figure on my porch, small and thin, wearing torn clothes. The face was turned away, but the hair was the right color, the right length. "How do I know it's really you?" A pause. Then, "You gave me your teddy bear when I was scared of thunder. Mr. Buttons. You said he would protect me." My gun hand started shaking. She was right. I had given Emma my teddy bear when she was 5 and afraid of storms. No one else knew that story. I reached for the door handle, then stopped. Something was wrong. Emma had been 20 when she disappeared, not 5. And if she'd really been lost in the woods for 20 years, she wouldn't look like a little girl. "Emma, what year is it?" Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came back, it was different. Colder. "Let me in, Catherine." That's when I saw it through the peephole. The figure on my porch was changing, growing taller. The torn clothes became matted fur. The human shape bent and twisted into something else entirely. I stepped back from the door just as something heavy slammed into it from the outside. The whole cabin shook. I heard claws scraping against wood and then a howl that made the windows rattle. I grabbed my radio with one hand and kept the gun steady with the other. "This is Ranger Redheart. I need immediate backup at my location. Armed and dangerous situation." The radio crackled with static, then went dead. No response. Another slam against the door, harder this time. I heard wood splintering. I ran to the back of the cabin and looked out the window. Yellow eyes stared back at me from the tree line, more than one pair. The thing had surrounded my cabin. No, not thing. Things. There was more than one of them now. The front door gave way with a crash that shook the entire house. I heard heavy footsteps in my living room, and then that voice again. Still Emma's voice, but wrong somehow. "Catherine, where are you? We want to play." I climbed out the back window as quietly as I could and dropped into my garden. The October air was cold against my skin, and fog was rolling in from the mountains. I could barely see 10 feet in any direction. I had to get to my truck. If I could reach the main road, maybe I could call for help. But as I crept around the side of the cabin, I heard multiple sets of footsteps in the forest around me. They were coordinating, moving together like a pack, like they'd done this before, like they'd been planning this for 20 years. I made it to my truck and fumbled with the keys. Behind me, I could hear them coming, not trying to hide anymore, just coming. The engine turned over on the third try, and I floored the gas pedal. Gravel sprayed as I spun out of the driveway and onto the mountain road. In the rearview mirror, I saw dark shapes emerging from the forest, running after me on 2 legs, then 4, then 2 again. But I was faster. The truck had a good engine, and I knew these roads better than anyone. I was almost to the main highway when I realized where I was going. Not away from danger. Toward it. The road I was on led to only one place, Clingman's Dome, the original battlefield, the place where it all started. I tried to turn around, but the fog was too thick now. I could barely see the road in front of me, and every time I slowed down, I heard them howling in the distance, getting closer. So I kept driving up the mountain toward the place where 400 Confederate soldiers had died screaming in 1863. The parking area at Clingman's Dome was empty, which wasn't surprising at 4 in the morning. I parked and grabbed my emergency pack from the back of the truck. Flares, rope, extra ammunition, a flashlight with fresh batteries, and Joseph Crowfeather's business card, which he'd given me before I left his house. I called the number, not really expecting him to answer. "I told you not to go alone," his voice said calmly. "How did you know?" "I've been waiting by the phone for 3 days." "Oh, you're at the Dome, aren't you?" "Yes. They herded me here. This was planned." "Of course it was. The Shadow Walker has been planning this since the day you arrived. Maybe longer." I could hear something moving in the fog around the parking area. Multiple somethings. "Joseph, if there's any way to stop this thing, I need to know now." "There is one way, but you won't like it." "Tell me." The Shadow Walker feeds on pain and trauma. It was born from the collective agony of those soldiers. But trauma can be transformed into something else, into peace. How? You have to give it what it wants. You have to face it without fear, without anger. You have to forgive it. Forgive the thing that killed my sister. Forgive the pain that created it. Forgive the soldiers who died here. Forgive yourself for not being able to save Emma. Through the fog, I saw yellow eyes appearing all around me. They formed a circle, keeping their distance, but ready to close in. "That's impossible. It's the only way. The Shadow Walker feeds on rage and fear. Take those away, and it starves." The creatures were getting closer. I could see their shapes now, sometimes human, sometimes animal, always wrong. There were 5 of them, maybe 6. But in the center of the circle, one figure stood apart from the rest. Smaller, more human. Emma. She looked exactly like she had at 20 years old. Same smile, same laugh, same way of tilting her head when she was curious about something. Except for the eyes. Her eyes were yellow, like the others. "Hello, Catherine," she said. "I've been waiting so long to see you again." I raised my gun, but couldn't pull the trigger. Even knowing it wasn't really her, I couldn't shoot my sister's face. "You're not Emma. I'm as much Emma as I am anything else. I carry her memories, her voice, her love for you. When I took her, I absorbed everything she was." "Why?" "Because you were always meant to come here. This was planned from the beginning. Your sister was just bait." The circle was getting tighter. I could smell them now. Wet fur and old blood and something like sulfur. "Why me?" "Because you're perfect. A protector who couldn't protect. A detective who couldn't solve. A sister who couldn't save. Your pain is exquisite." Joseph's words echoed in my head. Forgive without fear. Transform trauma into peace. I slowly lowered my gun. I forgive you, I said. Emma's face twisted with confusion and rage. What? I forgive the soldiers who died here. I forgive their pain and their fear. I forgive myself for not saving Emma. The other creatures were getting agitated, pacing back and forth. The fog was swirling around us like a tornado. You can't, Emma screamed. I won't let you. And I forgive you, I said directly to her. You're not evil. You're just pain that's been carrying itself for too long. You can rest now. Emma lunged at me with claws extended, but something was wrong. She was moving slower, like she was underwater. The other creatures were backing away, whimpering. I forgive all of it, I said louder. The war, the deaths, the fear, all of it. It's time to let go. Emma stopped in mid-lunge and fell to her knees. Her face was changing, cycling between human and animal and something else entirely. The other creatures were fading, becoming transparent. Please, she whispered. Don't make me go. I'm so lonely. I walked over and knelt beside her. Up close, I could see Emma's real face underneath the monster mask, scared and young and lost. You don't have to be lonely anymore, I said. You can rest. You can find peace. Emma looked up at me with eyes that were slowly turning from yellow to brown, her real eyes. Catherine, is it really you? Yes, I'm here. I found you. I'm so sorry. I couldn't stop it. It made me do things. I know. It's okay. Everything's okay now. Emma smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had when we were kids. I love you, big sister. I love you too, she said her eyes and disappeared like morning mist. The fog cleared and I was alone on the mountain. I sat on the ground at Klingman's Dome until sunrise, watching the fog lift from the valleys below. When the search and rescue team finally found me, I was still holding my phone, which had somehow started working again. Chief Ranger Davis asked me a lot of questions I couldn't really answer. How had I ended up on the mountain? Why was my cabin door broken? Where had I been for 6 hours? I told him I'd been tracking the animal that killed Tom Bradley and had gotten lost in the fog. It was close enough to the truth that he believed me. The state wildlife officials spent another week setting traps around Klingman's Dome, but they never caught anything. After a month with no more incidents, they declared the problem solved. Probably a rogue bear that had moved on to other territory. I let them believe that. Tom Bradley was the last victim. No more campers were attacked. No more strange tracks were found. The animals came back to the forest, and everything returned to normal. Almost everything. I still work as a park ranger in the Smokies. I still help lost hikers and deal with raccoons getting into trash cans. But now I also do something else. I keep watch. Because I've learned that some things never truly die. They just sleep for a while. Sometimes, on foggy October nights, I drive up to Klingman's Dome and walk the trails. Not because I'm looking for monsters, but because I'm looking for peace. The kind of peace that comes from understanding that pain doesn't have to become evil. The battlefield is quiet now. The mass grave where those 400 soldiers were buried has been properly marked with a memorial stone. Visitors come to pay their respects, and I make sure they're safe. Most of the time, they are. But occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, I'll find evidence that something is stirring. A strange track in the mud. A tree with fresh claw marks. A tourist who swears they saw something moving in the fog that didn't look quite right. When that happened, I remember Joseph Crow Feather's words about forgiveness. I remember Emma's face when she finally found peace. And I do what needs to be done, because some responsibilities never end. Some watches must be kept forever, and some sisters never really stop protecting each other, even after death. I still dream about Emma sometimes, but now the dreams are good ones. She's not lost in the forest anymore. She's not afraid. She's somewhere safe, somewhere bright, somewhere the shadows can't reach her, and she's waiting for me, but not yet. I still have work to do in these mountains. I still have people to protect. My name is Catherine Redhart, and I've been keeping watch in the Great Smoky Mountains for 18 years. Some nights I wonder what I'll do when my 20 years are up. Some nights I think I already know. My name is David Grimwood, and I've been a park ranger at Chattahoochee National Forest for 8 years now. I never thought I'd end up here, watching over these mountains in North Georgia. Growing up, my dad used to tell me stories about our family and these woods. Stories I thought were just fairy tales meant to keep kids from wandering off into the forest alone. I was wrong about that. Dead wrong. The Grimwood family has a history with Blood Mountain and the Cherokee burial grounds hidden deep in these woods. According to family stories, my great-great-great-grandfather Josiah made some kind of promise back in 1847. During the Trail of Tears, when the government was forcing the Cherokee people from their homeland, Josiah helped a dying Cherokee elder. The old man was grateful, but he also did something strange. He made Josiah swear that his family would always protect the sacred burial ground on Blood Mountain. Every 25 years, one of us becomes a ranger. Every single generation, like clockwork. My great-great-grandfather Samuel in 1872, great-grandfather Robert in 1897, great-aunt Margaret in 1922, my grandfather James in 1947, Dad in 1972, now me in 1997. Dad died 2 years ago. Heart attack, they said, but I always wondered if it was something more. The stress of keeping family secrets can kill a man, and Dad carried a lot of secrets. Before he died, he sat me down and told me things that made my skin crawl. He said the Cherokee elder didn't just ask for protection, he made sure we'd provide it, whether we wanted to or not. "There's something in those woods, David," Dad whispered from his hospital bed. "Something old and powerful. It watches over the burial ground, but it also watches over us. Makes sure we do our job." I thought he was just rambling from the medication. But here I am, wearing the ranger uniform, assigned to the exact same section of 4, said where every Grimwood before me has worked. The hiring office said it was a coincidence. I knew better. The Cherokee burial ground sits about 3 miles up Blood Mountain, hidden in a grove of ancient oak trees. Most hikers never find it. The trail markers seem to lead people away from that area without them noticing. I've walked those paths hundreds of times, and I swear they change. Not dramatically, but small things. A fallen log appears where it wasn't yesterday. A stream runs slightly different. New growth springs up overnight to block certain paths. The burial ground itself is beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Dozens of low stone mounds covered in moss and wildflowers. Some have Cherokee symbols carved into rocks. Others are marked with simple wooden posts that look much newer than they should be. The whole area feels alive, like it's breathing. The temperature drops 10 degrees when you step into the grove, even on hot summer days. I respect that place. Visit it twice a week, just to check on things. Remove any litter that blows in. Make sure no one's digging around or vandalizing anything. It's peaceful work, mostly. The kind of job that lets you think. But lately things have been different. Wrong, somehow. It started 3 weeks ago when I found the deer, 12 of them arranged in a perfect circle around one of the burial mounds. No wounds, no sign of disease or struggle. They just laid there like they'd decided to take a nap and never woke up. I called in the wildlife biologist, but she couldn't explain it. Natural causes, she wrote in her report, but her eyes said otherwise. Then came the hikers who got lost. A family from Atlanta spending the weekend camping. They had GPS, maps, everything you need to stay safe. But somehow they ended up walking in circles for 6 hours, always ending up back at the same creek. When I found them, they were crying and arguing. The father kept insisting they'd been walking downhill the whole time, but somehow they kept going up. The trail moved, the 8-year-old daughter told me while I walked them back to their car. I saw it. The path went one way, then it went another way. Kids see things adults miss. I know that now. The worst part started happening at night. I live in a small ranger cabin about a mile from the burial ground. It's quiet out there, just me and the forest sounds. But for the past 2 weeks, I've been hearing voices. Cherokee voices, speaking words I don't understand. They come from the direction of the burial ground, always around midnight. Last night I heard my name. Not David or Ranger Grimwood. They called me by my Cherokee name, the one Dad told me about but never explained. Kanuna, they whispered through the trees. Kanuna, come home. I don't know what that means, but it scares me more than I want to admit, because part of me, a part I don't understand, wants to answer. The voices got louder last night, clear enough that I could pick out individual words, even though I don't speak Cherokee. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and walked out to check the burial ground. Protocol says never investigate alone, but protocol doesn't cover what's been happening here. The forest felt different as soon as I stepped outside my cabin. Too quiet. No insects, no night birds, no rustling in the underbrush. Just silence so thick it pressed against my ears. My flashlight beam seemed weaker than usual, swallowed up by the darkness after just a few feet. I followed the familiar path up Blood Mountain, but it took me longer than it should have. Twice I found myself walking in the wrong direction without remembering turning around. The third time I stopped and really looked at where I was. The path had definitely changed. What should have been a gradual uphill walk had become a maze of switchbacks and dead ends. Kanuna. The voice came from my left, soft but clear as daylight. I spun around, shining my light into the trees. Nothing there but shadows and Spanish moss hanging like curtains. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Ranger Grimwood. Identify yourself." Silence. Then from behind me, "Kanuna, you are needed." I spun again. Still nothing. But now I could smell something strange. Sweet smoke, like burning sage mixed with cedar. And underneath that, something else. Something old and earthy, like dirt that's been undisturbed for centuries. I kept walking, following the scent and the voices. They seemed to be leading me toward the burial ground, but by a route I'd never taken before. The trees grew thicker here, older. Some of them had to be 300 years old, their trunks so wide that 3 people holding hands couldn't reach around them. That's when I saw the light. A soft blue-green glow flickered between the trees ahead. Not artificial light. I know every electric line and cell tower in this section of forest. This was something else entirely. It pulsed like a heartbeat, growing brighter and dimmer in a steady rhythm. I turned off my flashlight and crept forward. The glow was coming from the burial ground, but it looked completely different. The low stone mounds were covered in that same blue-green light, as if the rocks themselves were glowing. And standing among them were figures, people, or at least they looked like people from a distance. There were maybe 20 of them, all facing the largest burial mound in the center of the grove. They wore traditional Cherokee clothing, buckskin shirts, woven belts, feathers in their hair. Men and women of all ages, from children to elders. They stood perfectly still, not talking or moving, just watching. I should have turned around right then. Should have radioed for backup, or at least gone back to my cabin and waited for daylight. But I couldn't move. Something was pulling me forward, like an invisible rope tied around my chest. I stepped into the grove. The temperature drop hit me like jumping into an ice-cold lake. My breath came out in white puffs, even though it had been 80 degrees when I left the cabin. The figures didn't turn to look at me, but I felt them notice. A shift in the air, like they were all holding their breath. I walked closer to the center of the group. Now I could see their faces clearly, and my stomach dropped. They weren't solid. I could see through them to the trees beyond. And their eyes. Their eyes were completely white. No iris or pupil. Just glowing white light in the shape of eyes. One of them, an old man with long gray hair, finally turned toward me. "Kanuna," he said, and his voice came from everywhere at once. "You have come." Who are you?" My voice cracked like a teenager's. "What do you want?" "We are the guardians," the old man said. "As you are. As your father was. As his father was before him." The other figures began to turn now, all those white eyes focusing on me. Men, women, children, all dead but somehow still here, still watching over this place. Your test begins now, the old man continued. 3 trials await. Pass them, and you will understand your true purpose. Fail, and another must take your place. What kind of trials? I asked. But even as the words left my mouth, the figures began to fade. The blue-green light dimmed, and the normal nighttime sounds of the forest returned. Insects chirping, wind through the leaves, an owl calling in the distance. I was alone in the burial ground again, standing in complete darkness with a dead flashlight. It took me 3 hours to find my way back to the cabin. The path kept changing, leading me in circles or dead-ending at steep ravines that shouldn't exist. When I finally saw my porch light through the trees, I was shaking from cold and exhaustion. I spent the rest of the night writing down everything that happened, trying to make sense of it, reading through Dad's old journals, looking for any mention of trials or tests. I found references to the choosing and proving oneself worthy, but nothing specific. This morning, I called my supervisor and requested backup for patrol duties. Told him I'd been seeing signs of illegal camping in the remote areas and needed help checking them out. He's sending Ranger Martinez from the next district over. She'll be here tomorrow. I'm not going into those woods alone again, not until I understand what's happening to me, what happened to all the Grimwoods before me. But I have a feeling the choice isn't mine anymore. Whatever lives in that burial ground, it's been waiting for me my whole life, and now it's ready to collect. Ranger Martinez arrived this morning with coffee and a skeptical expression. Elena's been working the Georgia mountains for 15 years, and she's seen everything from bear attacks to meth labs hidden in caves. When I tried to explain why I needed backup without mentioning the supernatural stuff, she cut me off. "David, you look like hell. When's the last time you slept?" I couldn't tell her it was because every time I closed my eyes, I heard Cherokee voices calling my name. Instead, I showed her the reports from the past 3 weeks. The dead deer arranged in circles, hikers getting lost on familiar trails, equipment malfunctions in specific areas of the forest. "Could be environmental," Elena said, studying my notes. "Unusual magnetic activity or maybe gas leaks from underground. Explains the animal behavior and why people get disoriented." I wanted to believe her rational explanations, but deep down I knew better. The forest was testing me, and bringing Elena into it might have been a mistake. We spent the day patrolling the outer trails, checking campsites and talking to hikers. Everything seemed normal until late afternoon when we found the Thompson family from Birmingham. They'd been camping for 2 days and were packing up to leave. But something was wrong. "We can't find our daughter," Mr. Thompson said, his face pale and sweaty. "She went to use the bathroom about an hour ago, just behind those trees. We've been calling for her ever since." 8-year-old Sarah Thompson, blonde pigtails, bright pink jacket, the same little girl who'd told me the trails moved. Elena immediately called for search and rescue while I started tracking. Sarah's footprints were easy to follow at first, small sneaker treads heading away from the campsite toward a cluster of pine trees. But after about 50 yards, something strange happened. The prints stopped, not like she'd reached hard ground or rocks where tracks wouldn't show. They just ended, like she'd vanished into thin air. "This doesn't make sense," Elena muttered, kneeling beside the last clear footprint. "Kids don't just disappear." But I was already looking up, scanning the tree branches. Sometimes predators drag prey into trees. Sometimes kids climb up and get stuck. What I saw made my blood freeze. Scratched into the bark of the largest pine tree about 10 feet off the ground were Cherokee symbols. Fresh cuts, still oozing sap, and below them, hanging from a branch like a flag, was a piece of bright pink fabric. "Elena?" I called, pointing up. "Look!" She followed my gaze and cursed under her breath. We both knew what it meant. Whoever or whatever had taken Sarah could climb trees like a squirrel. "We need dogs," Elena said, but I was already shaking my head. "No time. Search and rescue won't get here for at least 2 hours, and it'll be dark in 3. If someone has her..." I couldn't finish the sentence. We followed the trail deeper into the forest, marking trees as we went so we could find our way back. The Cherokee symbols appeared more frequently now, carved into oaks and maples, always at eye level like someone wanted us to see them. They seemed to be leading us toward Blood Mountain, toward the burial ground. The sun was setting when we heard Sarah screaming, high-pitched, terrified screams coming from somewhere ahead. Ilakum. And I ran toward the sound, crashing through underbrush and jumping over fallen logs. The screaming stopped suddenly, replaced by an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. We found her in a small clearing about half a mile from the burial ground. She was sitting with her back against a tree, completely unharmed, but staring at something we couldn't see. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on the empty air in front of her. Sarah? Elena approached slowly, hands visible. Honey, are you okay? The little girl turned toward us, and I saw something that made me step back. Her eyes weren't quite right, still blue, still human, but there was something else behind them, something old and knowing. He wants to talk to you, Sarah said in a voice too calm for an 8-year-old who'd been missing for hours. The old man with the long hair. He says it's time for the second trial. Elena looked at me with confusion, but I understood. The Cherokee spirits weren't just testing me. They were using innocent people to force my cooperation, making it clear that my choices affected more than just myself. Where is he? I asked Sarah. She pointed toward the burial ground. He's waiting where the dead people sleep. He says you know the place. Elena grabbed my arm. David, what is she talking about? What dead people? Before I could answer, Sarah stood up and walked past us, heading back toward her family's campsite like nothing had happened. Her movements were normal, childlike again. Whatever had been speaking through her was gone. We should follow her, Elena said. But I was looking at the trees around the clearing. More Cherokee symbols carved fresh into the bark. But these were different from the others. Sharper, more aggressive. And underneath each one, hanging from thin branches, were small bones. Bird bones, I hoped, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Elkan. Anna, I said quietly. I need to tell you something about this place, about my family. She listened while I explained everything. The curse, the guardians, the voices in the night. Expected her to think I was crazy, maybe call for psychological evaluation. Instead, she nodded slowly. My grandmother was Seminole, she said. She used to tell stories about places like this. Thin spots, she called them, where the spirit world touches ours. Elena looked around the clearing, taking in the bone arrangements and symbols. This is one of those places, isn't it? I think so, and I think something's waking up. We made it back to Sarah and her family just as full darkness fell. The Thompsons were packing frantically, wanting to get off the mountain before spending another night. Sarah acted completely normal, chattering about wanting to stop for ice cream on the drive home. When her mother asked where she'd been, Sarah just shrugged. I got lost, but the nice man helped me find the clearing so Ranger David could find me. What nice man? Mr. Thompson demanded. The one with the long gray hair and the white eyes. Elena and I exchanged looks. The Cherokee spirits weren't hiding anymore. They were making themselves known, using whatever methods necessary to get my attention. After the Thompsons left, Elena and I sat in my cabin drinking coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened. She'd agreed to stay the night, partly for backup and partly because she was curious about what she'd experienced. So these trials, she said, what do you think they are? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the first one was when I found the burial ground and met the spirits. The second one, I paused, thinking about Sarah's strange behavior and the bone arrangements in the clearing. I think it was about showing me that innocent people could get hurt if I don't cooperate. And the third trial? Before I could answer, we heard it. Drums. Rhythmic, hypnotic drumming coming from the direction of Blood Mountain. It started soft, barely audible over the night sounds of the forest. But it grew louder, more insistent until it seemed to shake the cabin walls. Elena stood up and looked out the window. David, you need to see this. I joined her at the window and felt my knees go weak. The entire forest was glowing with that same blue-green light I'd seen at the burial ground. Not just around the sacred area, but everywhere. Every tree, every rock, every blade of grass pulsed with supernatural energy. And walking toward my cabin through the glowing forest were dozens of figures. Men, women, children, all wearing traditional Cherokee clothing, all with those terrible white eyes. "The third trial begins now," one of them called out, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. "Come, Kanuna, it is time to choose." The drums grew louder as the Cherokee spirits surrounded my cabin. Elena grabbed her radio, but static filled the airwaves. Her cell phone showed no signal. We were completely cut off from the outside world. "David," she whispered, backing away from the window. "What do they want?" "They want me to take the final test," I said, watching the spirits arrange themselves in a semicircle around the porch, "to prove I'm worthy of being the guardian." The old man with long gray hair stepped forward. Even through the glass I could feel the power radiating from him. This wasn't just any Cherokee spirit. This was the elder who had cursed my family 150 years ago. "Kanuna," his voice echoed inside my head, "you have seen what happens when the sacred ground is threatened. You have felt our power to protect what matters. Now you must choose. Accept your destiny willingly, or watch others pay the price for your fear." Elena looked at me with wide eyes. "I can hear him too." "How is that possible?" "Because you're here with me," I realized. "You're part of the trial now." The spirit elder raised his hand and images began flashing through me. I mined. Not my thoughts. His memories. I saw Josiah Grimwood in 1847, helping Cherokee families escape federal soldiers. I watched him kneel before this same elder as the old man lay dying, making promises that would bind our bloodline forever. Then I saw the other guardians. Samuel, in 1872, fighting off grave robbers with supernatural help. Robert, in 1897, leading a pack of spirit wolves against loggers who wanted to clear-cut the sacred grove. Margaret, in 1922, standing alone against a gang of moonshiners, Cherokee spirits giving her strength beyond any normal person. And my grandfather James, in 1947, sacrificing himself to stop government agents from building an atomic facility on Blood Mountain. He'd died protecting the burial ground, and the spirits had honored his sacrifice by making the mountain officially protected wilderness. Each guardian faced a choice, the elder's voice continued. Accept the responsibility willingly or be compelled by circumstances to act. Your father chose acceptance. He lived a long life because he understood his role. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked aloud. The elder smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Others will be called. The child who spoke our words, the woman beside you, the families who camp in our territory. They will be tested instead, until one proves worthy or..." He shrugged. "Until there are no more to test." Elena grabbed my arm. "David, whatever this is, we can figure it out together. You don't have to face it alone." But I was already understanding the true nature of the trial. It wasn't about proving I was strong enough or brave enough to be a guardian. It was about proving I cared enough about others to accept the burden willingly. "The development company," I said suddenly, "the one that wants to build the resort. They're coming tomorrow, aren't they?" The elder nodded. "They have permits, government approval. They plan to begin construction within the week." I thought about the reports I'd filed over the past month. Dead animals arranged in ritual patterns. Hikers getting lost on familiar trails. All of it was the spirits trying to warn me, preparing me for this moment. If I agree to be the guardian, really be the guardian, what does that mean? What am I agreeing to? "To protect the sacred ground with your life," the elder said. "To use whatever power we grant you to keep the dead at peace and the living at bay. To accept that you are no longer just human, but something more." Around the cabin, the other spirits began to chant. Low, rhythmic voices speaking Cherokee words that seemed to sink into my bones. Elena clutched my hand and I could feel her trembling. "I'll do it," I said, "but I have conditions." The chanting stopped. Every white eye focused on me. "Elena goes home safe. No more innocent people get dragged into this. And I want to know exactly what powers you're talking about. The elder stepped closer to the window. When he spoke, his voice came from inside the cabin, as if he were standing right beside us. You will be able to speak with all the spirits of this place, to command the animals of the forest, to walk between the world of the living and the world of the dead, to shape the paths and trails so that those who mean harm lose their way. And when your time comes to pass the guardianship to the next generation, you will join us in eternal watch. It sounded like a prison sentence. But then I thought about Sarah Thompson, lost in the woods and used as a messenger. About all the families who came here to enjoy nature, trusting that places like this would be protected. The development company, I said. How do I stop them legally? You don't, the elder replied. You stop them our way. I understood then. This wasn't about filing reports or going through proper channels. The Cherokee spirits had been protecting this land for over a century through direct action. Sometimes that meant guiding people away from danger. Sometimes it meant making threats disappear permanently. David, Elena whispered, you don't have to do this. There has to be another way. But I was already walking toward the door, the moment I stepped. Outside, the cold hit me like a physical blow. The spirits parted to create a path leading up Blood Mountain toward the burial ground. Come, the elder said, falling into step beside me. It is time you learned what it truly means to be Kanuna, the guardian wolf. The walk up the mountain took forever and no time at all. Reality seemed fluid around us. One moment we were walking through normal forest, the next we were moving through a landscape that glowed with supernatural energy. I could see the spirits of every animal that had ever died in these woods, every Cherokee warrior who had hunted here, every tree that had been cut down over the centuries. Elena stayed close beside me, though I wasn't sure if she was really there or if the spirits were just letting me see what I needed to see to go through with the ceremony. At the burial ground, hundreds of Cherokee spirits waited, not just the guardians, but entire families, generations of the dead who had been watching over this place. They formed concentric circles around the largest burial mound, the one that held the remains of the elder who had cursed my family. Kneel, the elder commanded. I knelt on the soft earth, feeling centuries of bones beneath the soil. The spirits began to chant again, and this time I understood some of the words. They were calling on their ancestors, asking for strength and wisdom to be passed down to the new guardian. The elder placed his hands on my shoulders, and electricity shot through my entire body. Not painful, but overwhelming, like being plugged into the power grid of the entire forest. Accept the responsibility, he said. Become what you were born to be. I accept, I whispered. The world exploded into light. I woke up in my cabin as the sun was rising. Elena was sitting in a chair beside my bed, looking exhausted but relieved. Thank God, she said when I opened my eyes. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. I was about to call for medical evacuation. The spirits, I said, sitting up slowly. Everything felt different, sharper. I could hear individual heartbeats of small animals in the forest, smell the specific scents of different tree types, feel the subtle vibrations of footsteps on trails miles away. They're gone, Elena said. Whatever happened last night, it's over. The forest looks normal again. But I knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. I spent the morning testing my new abilities. When I concentrated, I could sense every living thing within a 5-mile radius. Squirrels in their nests, deer drinking from streams, hikers approaching on the main trail. I could also feel something else. A network of intelligence that connected all the Cherokee spirits. They were still here, just invisible now, waiting. The development company arrived at noon. 3 SUVs full of executives, surveyors, and legal representatives. They had all the proper permits and government approvals. Legally, there was nothing I could do to stop them. But I wasn't operating under legal restrictions anymore. I met them at the main parking area, wearing my ranger uniform and trying to look professional. The lead executive, a woman named Patricia Hawkins, handed me a folder full of documents. Ranger Grimwood, we're here to begin the preliminary survey for the Blood Mountain Resort project. We'll need access to the upper trails for the next 3 days. I'm sorry, I said calmly. That area is temporarily closed due to wildlife activity. Hawkins frowned. What kind of wildlife activity? Aggressive bear behavior. We've had reports of a mother bear with cubs charging hikers. For public safety, the entire upper section is off limits until further notice. It was a lie, of course. But as I spoke, I felt the forest responding to my words. Somewhere up the mountain, a real bear roared. Then another, then a third. The development team looked nervous. We have legal authority to proceed, Hawkins insisted, but her voice was less confident now. And I have legal authority to close trails for public safety, I replied. You're welcome to appeal through the proper channels, but that process takes time. Over the next 3 hours, I watched the development team try repeatedly to access the upper trails. Each time, something went wrong. Their surveying equipment malfunctioned. Their GPS units led them in circles. One of the lawyers stepped in a hidden sinkhole and sprained his ankle. Every time they tried to go up Blood Mountain, the forest itself seemed to resist. By late afternoon, they gave up. As their convoy drove away, Hawkins leaned out her window and looked directly at me. This isn't over, Ranger Grimwood. Yes, it is, I said quietly, and meant it. That night, Elena and I sat on my porch talking about what had happened. She'd decided to request a transfer to this district permanently, claiming she wanted to help me document the unusual environmental phenomena we'd been experiencing. So what happens now? She asked. Now I do my job, I said. The real job, protecting this place and the people who visit it. And if the developers come back? I smiled, thinking about the network of Cherokee spirits I could now sense throughout the forest. Hundreds of guardians who had been protecting this land for generations. They weren't gone. They were just waiting for me to need them. They won't, I said. The mountain has ways of discouraging unwanted visitors. As if to prove my point, we heard the distant sound of drums echoing from Blood Mountain. Not threatening this time, but celebratory. The spirits were welcoming their newest guardian. I thought about my father and grandfather, about all the Grimwoods who had carried this burden before me. I understood now why Dad had seemed so tired in his later years, but also why he'd never left these mountains. This wasn't just a job or even a calling, it was a partner's. Hip, with forces older than recorded history. My radio crackled to life. Ranger Grimwood, we've got a report of missing hikers in your sector. Family of 4, last seen on the lower Blood Mountain Trail. On my way, I responded, standing up and grabbing my gear. But I wasn't just responding as a park ranger anymore. I was responding as something much more. As I walked into the forest, I felt the Cherokee spirits walking with me, lending me their knowledge and power. I could sense the missing family immediately, confused but unharmed, about 2 miles northeast of where they should be. It would be easy to find them now, easy to guide them back to safety, easy to make sure they had a story to tell about the helpful ranger who knew these woods better than anyone, because that's what guardians do. We protect people from dangers they never know exist, and we make sure the sacred places remain sacred. As I walked through the moonlit forest, I heard the elder's voice one last time, carried on the night wind. Welcome home, Kanuna. The drums echoed through the mountains, and I knew I was exactly where I belonged. My name is Sarah Battleborn, and I've seen things that would make most people run screaming into the night. But I'm not most people. I'm a 44-year-old former Army colonel with 22 years of combat under my belt, including 2 tours in Vietnam. These days, I work as a park ranger in the Cherokee National Forest, Tennessee, specifically in the Joyce Kilmer Memorial section. People always ask why I left the military for this quiet job. Truth is, after all those years of war, I thought I wanted peace. I thought I wanted to spend my days helping families enjoy nature, tracking lost hikers, and maybe dealing with the occasional bear problem. Simple stuff. Safe stuff. I was wrong. The Joyce Kilmer Memorial is beautiful, don't get me wrong. Giant old trees that have stood for hundreds of years, Hiking trails that wind through valleys so green they look like paintings, and streams so clear you can see every pebble on the bottom. It's the kind of place that makes city folks stop and stare, mouths open like they've never seen real wilderness before. But lately, something's been different. Wrong, even. It started about 6 months ago with little things. Animals acting strange, deer bolting for no reason, birds going quiet in the middle of the day, and dogs refusing to walk certain trails. I've been around nature long enough to know when something's off. Animals have instincts that keep them alive, and when they're all telling you to stay away from somewhere, you'd better listen. Then there were the missing hikers. Not unusual by itself. People get lost in these mountains all the time. What was unusual was how we found them, or rather, how we didn't find all of them. The first was a guy named Mike Henderson from Knoxville. Experienced hiker, good gear, filed a proper trail plan. We found his campsite 3 days later, and it looked like he'd left in a hurry. Tent as still up, food was scattered around, but Mike was nowhere to be seen. We searched for a week. Never found so much as a boot print leading away from that camp. The second disappearance happened 2 weeks later. A couple from Atlanta, the Johnsons. Same thing. Campsite looked like they'd run off in the middle of cooking dinner. Pot was still on the camp stove, beans burned to black. Their car was still in the parking lot, keys inside. By the third disappearance, I knew we had a problem. My military training kicked in, and I started looking at this like a tactical situation instead of just random bad luck. When you've spent as many years as I have studying enemy movements, you learn to see patterns. Someone, or something, was hunting in my forest. The local sheriff, Bob Martinez, thought I was being paranoid. "Sarah," he'd say, "people get lost. It happens. These mountains are bigger than some states." But Bob never served in combat. He never learned to read the signs of an organized enemy. I had, and everything I was seeing told me we were dealing with something that knew exactly what it was doing. The breakthrough came when I found the first tracks. I was doing my morning patrol on the Poplar Cove Trail when I saw them, footprints in the mud beside Hidden Creek. At first glance, they looked almost human. Big, sure, but human-shaped. Size 18, maybe 20 boots, I figured. Some really tall hiker with big feet. Then I looked closer. The prints were barefoot. Toes clearly visible, each one longer than my thumb. The stride was wrong, too. Nearly 6 feet between steps. No human walks like that. No human could walk like that. But the thing that made my blood run cold wasn't the size or the shape. It was the pattern. The tracks didn't wander like an animal's would. They followed the trail for exactly 200 yards, then cut off into thick brush at a 90° entr'empseams. Eerie angle. Military precise. Like someone doing reconnaissance on our trail system. I followed those tracks for 3 miles through terrain that would challenge a mountain goat. Whoever made them moved through that forest like they owned it, never hesitating, never backtracking. They knew exactly where they were going. The tracks led to a clearing I'd never seen before, even though I'd been patrolling these mountains for 2 years. It was perfectly circular, about 50 feet across, with the grass worn down like something heavy had been meeting there regularly. In the center of the clearing, I found something that made me understand this wasn't just about missing hikers anymore. It was a pile of human belongings, backpacks, hiking boots, water bottles, even a couple of GPS devices, all arranged in a neat stack, like trophies, like a collection. And lying on top of the pile, carefully placed where anyone entering the clearing would see it first, was Mike Henderson's driver's license. I drew my service weapon and started backing toward the tree line, every combat instinct I'd ever developed screaming at me to get out of that clearing. Fast. That's when I heard it, a sound I'll never forget as long as I live. It started low, like a groan, then rose to something between a howl and human speech. It was coming from at least 3 different directions, which meant there were at least 3 of them, and they were coordinating. I ran. I made it back to my truck in record time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched the whole way. Every shadow seemed to move. Every branch that creaked in the wind sounded like footsteps. By the time I reached the parking area, my shirt was soaked with sweat, despite the cool mountain air. I tried to convince myself it was just adrenaline, just an overactive imagination from too many years in combat zones. But deep down, I knew better. Something was out there, and it was intelligent enough to collect trophies and coordinate attacks. The next morning I called in sick and drove to Knoxville to see my old friend, Tommy Chen. Tommy had served with me in Vietnam as a communications specialist, and now he ran a military surplus store. More importantly, he still had contacts in intelligence. "Sarah," Tommy said after I finished telling him about the clearing, "you know how crazy this sounds, right?" "Crazy like enemy sappers digging tunnels under our fire base was crazy," I replied. "Crazy like VC coordinating attacks with bird calls was crazy?" Tommy was quiet for a long moment. He'd been there for both of those things. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" "Information. Have you heard anything from other parks, other states? Missing persons? Strange animal attacks? Anything that might fit the pattern?" Tommy disappeared into his back office and came out 20 minutes later with a thick folder. "This is off the books," he said. "Some of my old buddies in different agencies have been talking, quietly." The folder contained incident reports from 6 different states, all in heavily forested areas. Missing hikers, unexplained animal behavior, and in 3 cases, unidentified footprints. The pattern went back almost 5 years, but the frequency was increasing. What used to be 1 or 2 incidents a year was now happening monthly. "There's something else," Tommy said. "Remember Jim Walsh from our old unit?" I nodded. Jim had been our best tracker, could follow a trail through rice paddies in the middle of monsoon season. Jim's been working as a hunting guide up in Montana. He called me last month, said he'd been tracking something that didn't make sense, something big, smart, and organized. He was planning to investigate further. Jim disappeared 3 weeks ago. Local sheriff found his truck, but no sign of Jim. I felt cold spread through my chest. Jim Walsh didn't just disappear. If something had taken Jim, it was dangerous enough to handle a combat veteran with 40 years of wilderness experience. I spent the rest of the day reading through the files. By evening, I had a theory I didn't want to believe. Someone was coordinating these disappearances across multiple states. The attacks were too similar, too well planned to be random, and whatever was doing it was getting bolder, taking more people, leaving fewer traces. I drove back to Cherokee National Forest just as the sun was setting. I needed to see that clearing again, needed to confirm what I'd found wasn't just fear playing tricks on my memory. The clearing was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The pile of trophies was bigger. On top of the stack, arranged just like Mike Henderson's license had been, was Jim Walsh's dog tag. I was studying the new additions when I heard movement in the trees around the clearing, not random forest sounds, deliberate footsteps, moving in a coordinated pattern. They were surrounding me. I drew my sidearm and tried to count the sounds, at least 5 different positions, maybe more. They were taking their time, moving slowly, like they had all day. Like they were confident I wasn't going anywhere. The first one I saw clearly nearly made me drop my weapon. It stepped out from behind a massive oak tree about 30 feet away, and for a moment my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair, with arms that reached almost to its knees. The face was almost human, but wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. But it wasn't the size or the appearance that terrified me most. It was the intelligence in its eyes. This thing was studying me the same way I'd studied enemy positions in Vietnam, calculating distance, angles, escape routes. It raised one massive arm and pointed directly at me, then made a series of grunts and clicks that sounded almost like speech. Immediately, I heard answering calls from the other positions around the clearing. They were communicating, planning. The creature took a step forward, and I could see it was holding something in its other hand. Jim Walsh's hunting knife. "Stop right there," I shouted, aiming my pistol at its center mass. The thing tilted its head like it was curious about my weapon. Then it did something that chilled me to the bone. It smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile you see on the face of someone who knows they're about to win, who's been planning this moment for a long time. I fired 3 rounds center mass. All 3 hit. I could see the impact, see it stagger backward. But it didn't go down. It looked down at the bullet wounds, then back at me, and that smile got wider. The others started moving in from all sides. I emptied my clip in the direction of the closest one and ran for the tree line. Behind me, I heard that coordinated howling again, but this time there was something else in it, something that sounded almost like laughter. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, and I didn't stop driving until I was back in town with every light in my house turned on. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my window, wind in the trees, a cat knocking over a garbage can, even the refrigerator cycling on, made me grab for my weapon. By morning, I'd consumed half a pot of coffee and made a decision that would probably get me fired. I was done playing defense. I called in another sick day and drove to the next county over to visit Marcus Rodriguez, another Vietnam buddy who'd gone into private security after the war. Marcus had connections to people who dealt in things that weren't exactly legal but were definitely effective. "You want enough firepower to stop a grizzly bear?" Marcus said after I explained what I needed. "Except you're not hunting bears." "I'm not hunting anything," I told him. "I'm preparing to defend myself against something that's been hunting me." Marcus didn't ask any more questions. Within 2 hours, I had a Remington 870 shotgun loaded with slugs, a .308 rifle with a night scope, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. He also threw in some military-grade flares and a radio that could reach the state police if things went really bad. "Sarah," he said as I loaded everything into my truck, "whatever's out there, don't try to be a hero. You've got nothing left to prove to anyone." But he was wrong. I had everything to prove, especially to myself. I'd spent 22 years protecting people from enemies they couldn't even imagine. I wasn't about to stop now just because this enemy was different from anything I'd faced before. I spent the afternoon preparing like I was going on a combat mission. I studied topographic maps of the forest, identified escape routes and defensive positions, and planned supply caches in case I had to stay out there for several days. Most importantly, I filed a detailed report with the state police, along with copies of all the evidence I'd collected. If something happened to me, at least someone would know what they were dealing with. Just after sunset, I parked my truck at the trailhead and hiked back toward the clearing. This time, I wasn't going to run. This time, I was going to get answers. I set up an observation post about 200 yards from the clearing, behind a fallen log with a clear view of the trophy pile. Then I waited. At 11:47 p.m., they came back. The first one emerged from the tree line like a shadow, moving with impossible quiet for something so large. It went straight to the trophy pile and began arranging the items, like a curator setting up a museum display. 2 more joined it, and I could see they were communicating through a series of gestures and quiet sounds. Hand signals. They were using hand signals just like military units do when they need to coordinate silently. That's when I realized the terrible truth. These things hadn't just learned to use tools and collect trophies. They'd learned warfare. Somehow they'd been observing human military operations and adapting our tactics. I was watching the enemy evolve in real time. The largest of the 3, probably the leader, made a sweeping gesture toward the forest, and the other 2 disappeared in different directions. It was organizing patrols, setting up a perimeter. I started to back away from my position when something massive grabbed me from behind. A 4th creature had flanked me while I was watching the others. It lifted me off the ground with one arm while covering my mouth with a hand the size of a dinner plate. Up close, the smell was overwhelming, like wet fur mixed with something rotten. But what terrified me most was what happened next. Instead of killing me immediately, it carried me toward the clearing like I was a prize, like it wanted the others to see what it had caught. The leader looked up as we approached and made a sound that was definitely not random animal noise. It was a word, rough and distorted by vocal cords that weren't designed for human speech, but unmistakably a word. Colonel. It knew my rank. Somehow, these things had learned enough about human military structure to identify officers. They weren't just hunting randomly, they were targeting leadership. The creature holding me set me down, but kept one massive hand on my shoulder. The leader approached and studied me like I was a specimen in a laboratory. When it spoke again, the words were clearer. "Sarah, Battleborn. They knew my name. The leader gestured to the trophy pile, and I could see it wasn't just random belongings anymore. The items were arranged by military rank and experience level. Jim Walsh's Special Forces patch was displayed prominently. Next to it were insignia from other veterans, Rangers, Marines, Airborne. They were specifically hunting soldiers. "Why?" I managed to ask. The leader tilted its head and made a sound that might have been laughter. Then it pointed toward the mountains and spoke one more word that made my blood freeze. War. The creature holding me suddenly released its grip and stepped back. I thought for a moment they might let me go, but then I heard why they'd backed off. More of them were coming through the trees. A lot more. I counted at least 15, maybe 20. They emerged from the forest in formation. Scouts flanking the main group, rear guard covering their backs, and what looked like specialized roles for different members of the unit. It was a military structure I recognized from countless briefings and field manuals. These things had formed an army. The leader barked a series of commands, and the new arrivals began setting up what I could only describe as a base camp. They were establishing defensive positions, posting sentries, and organizing supply areas. In less than 20 minutes, they'd turned the clearing into a fortified position that would have impressed any military academy instructor. And I was trapped in the middle of it. But the worst part wasn't that I was captured. The worst part was watching them work. Every movement was purposeful, every action coordinated. They'd been studying human warfare for years, probably decades, and they'd learned it well. Whatever these creatures were, wherever they'd come from, they'd decided that humanity was the enemy, and they were preparing to fight a war we didn't even know had begun. They kept me alive for 3 days, not out of mercy. I figured that out pretty quickly. They kept me alive because they were interrogating me. The leader, who the others seemed to call Alpha, through a series of grunts and gestures, knew enough English to ask basic questions about human military tactics, patrol schedules, and weapon capabilities. I didn't tell them anything at first. Old habits from prisoner of war training. But after watching them for 3 days, I realized something that changed everything. They didn't need my information. They already knew more about military operations than most actual soldiers. They'd been studying us for years. On the morning of the 4th day, Alpha brought me something that made my stomach turn. It was a thick folder, handmade from some kind of bark paper, filled with drawings and what looked like written reports. But the writing wasn't in any human language I'd ever seen. The drawings, though, those I understood perfectly. They were tactical diagrams of military bases, detailed sketches of weapons and vehicles, and organizational charts showing human command structures. Some of the diagrams were so accurate they could have come from classified military manuals. "Vietnam," Alpha said, pointing to one particular section. The drawing showed a firebase layout that looked uncomfortably familiar. "Cambodia," it continued, pointing to another. "Afghanistan, Iraq." These things had been watching. For decades, they'd been observing human conflicts, learning our tactics, studying our weaknesses, and now they were ready to use that knowledge against us. Alpha closed the folder and fixed me with those disturbingly intelligent eyes. "Your species," it said in that rough, barely human voice, "destroys everything. Forests, animals, balance." It gestured toward the mountains, our home for thousands of years. "Your people bring machines, roads, pollution, kill our food, poison our water." I was starting to understand. This wasn't just random violence. This was a calculated response to human expansion into their territory. They'd decided that coexistence was impossible, so they were preparing for extinction warfare. "We learned your ways," Alpha continued, "studied your wars. Now we use them against you." It made a series of gestures, and several of the other creatures brought over items I recognized from the trophy pile. But now I could see they weren't just trophies. They were intelligence files. Jim Walsh's notebook contained detailed information about hunting patterns and animal behavior. A missing park ranger's radio had been modified to monitor police and emergency frequencies. GPS devices had been reprogrammed to map human patrol routes and weak points in forest coverage. They weren't just collecting souvenirs, they were building an intelligence database on human operations in wilderness areas. How many? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Alpha made a sound that might have been laughter. Enough, it said. Then it gestured toward the forest with one massive arm. Every mountain, every forest, every place your people have not yet destroyed. The implication was clear. This wasn't just one group of creatures in one national forest. This was a coordinated effort across the entire continent, maybe the entire world. Everywhere humans had pushed into wilderness areas, these things had been watching, learning, and preparing. And now they were ready to push back. Alpha stood and made a series of gestures to the others. I didn't need to understand their language to know what was happening. They were done with me. I'd served my purpose as a source of information and a test subject for their interrogation techniques, but they'd made one mistake. In all their studying of human military tactics, they'd missed something crucial about soldiers like me. We don't give up, ever. During the 3 days of captivity, I'd been working on loosening the ropes they'd tied around my wrists. The knots were good, but they weren't perfect. More importantly, they'd underestimated human flexibility and determination. When Alpha turned its back to address the others, I slipped my hands free. I had maybe 30 seconds before they noticed. 30 seconds to grab something useful and get out of their camp. The rifle Marcus had given me was 20 feet away, leaning against a tree where they'd put it after capturing me. I made it 15 feet before the closest sentry spotted me. What followed was the most intense 30 minutes of my life, and that's saying something for someone who'd survived multiple firefights in Vietnam. This easy creatures might have learned human tactics, but they'd also kept their natural advantages: speed, strength, and knowledge of the terrain that was beyond anything human. I reached the rifle and got off 6 shots before they flanked my position and forced me to move. The .308 rounds did damage. I saw at least 2 of them go down, but not enough to stop the others from pursuing me through the forest. For the next half hour, I used every escape and evasion technique I'd ever learned, plus a few I improvised on the spot. They were faster and stronger, but I was smaller and more experienced at moving quietly through hostile territory. The chase ended at a cliff overlooking Hidden Creek, about 2 miles from their camp. I was out of ammunition, out of options, and facing at least 8 of them in a semicircle that left me nowhere to go but over the edge. Alpha stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd met it, the creature looked angry. Really angry. "You killed our scouts," it said. "Young ones, learning your ways so they could protect their families." I realized then that this wasn't just about territorial disputes or environmental destruction. These things had families, communities, maybe even civilization of their own. And from their perspective, humans weren't just invaders. We were existential threats to their entire species. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "But you're killing innocent people." Alpha's expression didn't change. "No innocence," it replied. "Your people destroy everything they touch. We protect what remains." It gestured to the others, and they began moving closer. I had maybe 10 seconds before they reached me. That's when I heard the helicopters. Tommy Chen had kept his word. When I hadn't checked in for 4 days, he'd called in every favor he had with law enforcement and military contacts. 3 state police helicopters were approaching us, aching fast with spotlights that cut through the forest darkness like searchlights. Alpha looked up at the aircraft, then back at me. For a moment, I thought it might retreat with the others into the deep forest where the helicopters couldn't follow. Instead, it smiled that terrible smile again. "More will come," it said. "More soldiers, more weapons, more of your war." It raised one massive arm toward the helicopters. "Good. We are ready." Then Alpha and the others melted back into the forest like shadows, leaving me alone on the cliff edge with the sound of rotor blades getting closer. They pulled me out of those mountains 3 hours later, dehydrated and exhausted, but alive. The state police wanted a full report. The FBI wanted to interview me about domestic terrorism. and the Park Service wanted to know why I'd been carrying enough firepower to outfit a small rebellion. I told them everything, every detail, every encounter, every piece of evidence I'd collected. They listened politely, took notes, and filed my report in whatever bureaucratic black hole handles cases that don't fit normal categories. Officially, the missing hikers were victims of wild animal attacks. The clearing was listed as a natural phenomenon, and my experiences were attributed to stress and possible head trauma from my fall near Hidden Creek. Unofficially, things changed fast. Within a week, the Joyce Kilmer Memorial was closed to the public for environmental assessment. Military personnel began showing up in unmarked vehicles, and satellite surveillance of the area increased dramatically. Someone, somewhere, was taking the threat seriously, even if they couldn't acknowledge it publicly. Tommy Chen called me a month later with news that confirmed my worst fears. Similar incidents were being reported from wilderness areas across 12 states. Park rangers, hunters, and hikers were disappearing at an accelerating rate, and the few survivors who made it out told stories that sounded uncomfortably familiar. The creatures were expanding their operations. More disturbing. G was what Tommy's contacts in intelligence were hearing from international sources. Reports from Canada's national parks, Siberian forests, and the Amazon rainforest all described encounters with unidentified bipedal creatures showing signs of organized behavior and tactical intelligence. This wasn't just a North American problem, it was global. I resigned from the Park Service and moved to a small town in Kansas, about as far from any serious wilderness as I could get. But I didn't retire. Instead, I started reaching out to other veterans, other people who'd had encounters with these things, other individuals who understood that humanity was facing a new kind of war. We call ourselves the Watchers now. Nothing official, nothing that shows up on government records. Just a loose network of people who monitor wilderness areas and try to document what's really happening out there. The picture we've pieced together is terrifying. The creatures, we've started calling them evolutionaries because of their ability to adapt and learn, have been observing human civilization for at least 50 years. They've studied our technology, our military tactics, our social structures, and our weaknesses. Now they're using that knowledge against us in a systematic campaign to reclaim wilderness areas from human control. They don't want coexistence. They want us gone. The government knows. Classified reports from multiple agencies confirm that these encounters are real and increasing in frequency. But public acknowledgement would cause panic, so the official response is denial and cover-up, while military and intelligence resources are quietly repositioned. We're fighting a war that most people don't even know exists. Last week, I got a call from a forest ranger in Montana. She'd found a clearing full of human belongings arranged in neat stacks just like the one I'd discovered in Tenbums, Nessie. But this pile was bigger, much bigger. And on top of the stack was a handwritten note in perfect English. Colonel Battleborn, the student has become the teacher. The war continues. Alpha. They remember me. They're still learning. And they're still recruiting. Sometimes, late at night when the wind is blowing hard outside my Kansas home, I can almost hear that coordinated howling in the distance. It's probably just my imagination, probably just the sound of air moving through power lines and telephone wires. But I keep my rifle loaded anyway, because I know they're coming. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next month, but eventually. They've learned patience from us, along with everything else. And when they finally decide that the cities are just another type of forest that needs to be reclaimed, we'll need to be ready. The evolutionary war isn't over. It's just beginning. My name is Eleanor Nightingale, and I need to tell someone what really happened at Alpha 7 before they come for me too. I was a marine biologist back then, had my PhD from Woods Hole, published papers on deep-sea creatures that nobody else believed existed. That's probably why they picked me in 1968. The CIA needed someone who wouldn't run screaming when they saw something impossible. The letter came on a Tuesday. Official government seal, classified stamps everywhere. Your country needs your expertise, it said. Report to Jefferson National Forest, Mount Rogers area, Virginia. Tell no one. I packed my bags that night. My mom thought I was going on another research trip. I kissed her goodbye and promised to write. I never did get to keep that promise. The drive took 6 hours through winding mountain roads. The deeper I went into the forest, the quieter it got. No birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. My radio lost signal around mile marker 47, leaving me alone with just the sound of my engine and the crunch of gravel under my tires. The facility looked like any other government building from the outside. Gray concrete, small windows, chain-link fence with razor wire. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my car. The air tasted metallic, like pennies left in your mouth. And cold. Way too cold for September in Virginia. Dr. Marcus Webb met me at the gate. He was the project director, a thin man with nervous eyes who kept checking his watch every few minutes. "Dr. Nightingale," he said, shaking my hand. "Welcome to Alpha 7. I hope you're ready for this." "Ready for what?" I asked. He looked around, then leaned closer. "You'll see. But Eleanor, once you walk through those doors, there's no going back. You understand?" I nodded, but I didn't understand. Not really. How could I? The inside was different from what I expected. Instead of government-issue furniture and fluorescent lights, it felt more like a zoo, or maybe a prison. Long hallways with thick steel doors. Each door had a number and a small window with metal shutters. The smell hit me right away. Animal musk mixed with cleaning chemicals and something else I couldn't name. "We have 12 researchers here," Webb explained as we walked. "You make 13. Biologists, psychologists, veterinarians, the best in their fields, and all sworn to complete secrecy." "What exactly are we studying?" I asked. Webb stopped in front of a heavy door marked Specimen A. He looked through the window, then stepped back. "See for yourself." I pressed my face to the glass and looked in. At first I thought it was a man, tall, maybe 6 feet, sitting cross-legged on the floor of what looked like a large cell. Then he looked up at me. The eyes were wrong. Too big, too knowing. The face was covered in dark hair, and the hands. The hands had fingers too long for any human. It tilted its head and made a sound, not quite human, not quite animal. A questioning sound, like it was asking who I was. "Dear God," I whispered. "That's a young Sasquatch," Webb said quietly. "We caught him 3 months ago. He's incredibly smart. Watch this." Webb tapped on the glass. The creature stood up, and up, and up, until it towered over us even through the thick window. It walked to a table in the corner and picked up colored blocks. Then, piece by piece, it arranged them into patterns, complex patterns that hurt to look at. "He does that for hours," Webb said. "We don't know what it means, but it's definitely some kind of communication." My hands were shaking. Everything I thought I knew about the world had just crumbled. "How many specimens do you have?" 3 primary subjects, plus some smaller ones. Come on, I'll show you the rest." As we walk deeper into the facility, I noticed the other researchers. They all had the same look in their eyes. Excited, but scared, like children who'd found something wonderful and terrible at the same time. Some of them had been there for months, Webb told me. Others for over a year. "The funding comes from Project Blue Book," he explained. "But this goes way beyond UFOs. The military wants to know if we can use these creatures. Train them. Control them." "Control them?" I stopped walking. "These are living beings." "Yes," Webb said. "And possibly the future of warfare. Imagine soldiers who can't be killed by conventional weapons, who can track enemies through any terrain, who strike fear into the hearts of anyone who sees them." That night, alone in my small room, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Through the thin walls, I could hear sounds. Scratching, low growls, and sometimes, late at night, something that sounded almost like crying. I should have left then. Should have packed my bags and driven away as fast as I could. but I was a scientist. I wanted to understand. And that curiosity, that need to know the truth, would end up costing more lives than I can count. My first week at Alpha 7, I learned the daily routine. Morning briefings at 0800, lab work until noon, specimen observation in the afternoon, data analysis in the evening, lights out at 2200 with night security taking over. But nothing could have prepared me for meeting the other specimens. Specimen B was the Fook monster. I'd heard stories about it growing up in Arkansas, a huge ape-like creature that terrorized a small town back in the early 70s. Except this was 1968, and the creature was real, and it was locked in a reinforced steel cage that looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. Dr. Sarah Chen, our veterinarian, took me to see it on my third day. "Stay at least 10 feet back from the bars," she warned, "and whatever you do, don't make direct eye contact." The creature was massive, easily 9 feet tall and covered in thick, dark fur. Its shoulders were broader than any human's, and its arms hung down past its knees. But what scared me most were its eyes. They held intelligence, yes, but also a rage so pure and focused that it made my stomach turn. "How did you catch it?" I asked. "Tranquilizer darts. Took 17 of them to bring it down. It killed 3 members of the capture team before we got it subdued." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands shook as she made notes on her clipboard. "It eats 40 pounds of raw meat every day, preferably fresh." As if it heard us talking, the creature turned its massive head toward us. Its lips pulled back, showing teeth the size of railroad spikes. It made a sound, part roar, part scream, that echoed through the entire facility. Other sounds answered from different parts of the building. The specimens were talking to each other. "Does that happen often?" I asked. "Every night," Sarah said. "Around 3 a.m. They all start calling to each other. The guards call it the hour of howling." The most disturbing specimen was C, the dogman. Dr. James Park, our psychologist, introduced me to it on Friday of my first week. We stood in an observation room looking down into what looked like a den. Hay covered the floor, and bones were scattered everywhere. "Where is it?" I asked. "Right there." James pointed to what I thought was just a pile of hay in the corner. As I watched, the hay moved. What I'd taken for debris was actually a creature, perfectly camouflaged. It stood up slowly, and I gasped. From the waist up, it looked almost human. Pale skin, lean muscles, a face that could pass for a man's in dim light. But the legs were wrong. Bent backwards like a dog's, covered in coarse fur, ending in claws instead of feet. "The transformation is the most remarkable part," James said, making notes. "It can shift between forms. We've documented the entire process." "How long does it take?" "About 20 minutes for a complete change. The bone structure actually alters. We have X-rays showing the skeleton reshape itself." James's voice had the tone of someone describing a miracle, but his eyes looked haunted. The pain it must experience. It screams the entire time. "And you make it transform?" "For research purposes, yes. We need to understand the mechanism." I felt sick. "How do you make it change?" "Stress. Extreme stress triggers the transformation. We've found that certain stimuli are very effective." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the creatures locked in their cages. Were they afraid? Did they understand what was happening to them? The Sasquatch with its sad, knowing eyes. The Fook monster's pure rage. The dogman's agonized screams during transformation. At 3 a.m., the howling started. It began with Specimen A, a low, mournful call that seemed to shake the walls. Then B answered with a roar that made my teeth ache. Finally, C joined in with a sound I can't describe. Part human scream, part wolf howl, part something else entirely. For 30 minutes, they called to each other across the facility, and I swear I heard something else in those calls. Not just animal communication, language. They were talking, planning, sharing information. I got dressed and walked to the observation deck. Most of the other researchers were there too, all looking tired and scared. Through the windows, we could see into the specimen areas. The creatures weren't just making noise, they were pacing, moving in patterns, working together, even though they were separated by thick walls. "It's getting worse," Dr. Webb said quietly. "The calls are happening more often, and they're getting smarter." "Smarter how?" I asked. "Watch Specimen A tomorrow. It's learned to pick the locks on its cage. We have to replace them every day now." Dr. Lisa Park, who monitored Specimen C, spoke up. "The dogman stopped eating 3 days ago. We think it's going on a hunger strike." "And B broke its restraints yesterday," Sarah added. "Snapped steel cables like rubber bands. We had to add more reinforcement to its cage." Webb nodded grimly. "The military wants results faster. They're pressuring us to move to the next phase of research." "Which is?" "Breeding programs. They want to create human cryptid hybrids, super soldiers that combine human intelligence with cryptid abilities." The room went quiet. Even in the darkness, I could see the horror on everyone's faces. "That's impossible," I said. "Maybe, but we've been ordered to try. Starting next week, we'll begin genetic modification experiments, and—" Webb hesitated. "We'll need volunteers for the human genetic material." Nobody spoke. Outside, the howling continued, and I realized that somewhere in those inhuman sounds was something that sounded almost like mourning, like the creatures knew what was coming. The experiment started on Monday morning. I wasn't allowed in the surgical suite, but I could hear everything from the observation room above. Dr. Patricia Ramos, our chief geneticist, worked with mechanical precision. The sounds that came from Specimen A during the tissue extraction will haunt me forever. Not just the screams, though those were bad enough, but the way they changed pitch, like the creature was trying to form words, trying to plead. "It's trying to talk," I said to Webb. "Impossible. These are animals." But I knew better. I'd been studying Specimen A for 2 weeks now. It had learned to use sign language, simple words at first: food, water, pain, then more complex ideas. Yesterday, it had signed home and family over and over again. The tissue samples went to the genetics lab for analysis. Dr. Ramos worked around the clock, trying to find ways to splice human and cryptid DNA. The military representatives visited twice a week, demanding progress reports. Meanwhile, the specimens were changing. Specimen B had stopped eating. It just sat in the corner of its cage, massive shoulders hunched, staring at the walls. But every few hours, it would stand up and test the bars of its prison. The steel was starting to bend. Specimen C was the worst. The transformation experiments had broken something inside it. It stayed in its human form now, curled up in the hay, rocking back and forth. Sometimes I caught it staring at its own hands like it didn't recognize them. And Specimen A. Specimen A was planning something. I first noticed it on Thursday. The creature had stopped doing its usual activities. No more colored block patterns, no more sign language practice. Instead, it spent all day sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, like it was meditating. But every few minutes, it would tap on the floor. Not randomly, in patterns. Morse code. I'd learned it in college for a marine biology research project. The Sasquatch was tapping out messages. The same message over and over: help coming soon. I should have reported it immediately, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Specimen A looked at me through the observation window, with hope in those 2 human eyes. Or maybe I was starting to understand that we weren't the scientists here. We were the monsters. On Friday night, everything went wrong at once. I was working late in the genetics lab when the alarms started. Red lights flashed and the automated voice echoed through the facility. "Security breach in Specimen Area B. All personnel to evacuation stations." I ran to the observation deck and looked down into B's containment area. The massive cage was empty. Twisted steel bars lay scattered across the floor like broken toys. In the middle of the destruction sat Dr. Sarah Chen, our veterinarian. She wasn't moving. "Where is it?" someone screamed. The answer came from above. A roar shook the entire building, and pieces of ceiling tile rained down on us. Specimen B wasn't trying to escape. It was hunting. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in. bathing everything in hellish red light. Through the facility, his intercom system, we heard sounds that shouldn't exist. Footsteps too heavy to be human, but too calculated to be animal. Doors slamming, metal scraping against concrete, and underneath it all a sound that made my blood freeze. Laughter. Low, rumbling, intelligent laughter. "It's in the ventilation system," Webb whispered. Bang. Something massive hit the observation deck door from outside. The reinforced steel buckled inward. Bang. A second hit, and I could see claws punching through the metal like it was paper. "The emergency exit," Lisa Park said. "We can get to the main lab, lock ourselves in." We ran. Behind us, the observation deck door exploded open and Specimen B poured through the gap. It had to duck to fit through doorways built for humans, but it moved with surprising grace. And speed. Dear God, the speed. I was the last one through the lab door. As I slammed it shut, I caught a glimpse of glowing eyes in the darkness behind us. Eyes that held more than animal intelligence. They held strategy. "The radio," Webb gasped. "We need to call for help." But when he grabbed the emergency radio, all we heard was static. Then, through the white noise, a voice. Deep, rumbling, almost human. "No help coming. We talk now." The radio went dead. Through the lab's security monitors, we watched the impossible. Specimen B wasn't just rampaging. It was methodically going through the facility, cell by cell, freeing the other specimens. First A, then C, then the smaller creatures we'd captured over the months. And they weren't escaping. They were organizing. On camera 7, I watched Specimen A teaching the others sign language. On camera 3, Specimen C was examining security equipment, learning how it worked. On camera 12, Specimen B was doing something that made my legs go weak. It was reading our research files. "They're learning," I whispered. "They're learning about us." D. Ramos was crying in the corner. "The genetic samples. They know what we were trying to do. They know we were going to..." The lights came back on. All of them. The facility was brighter than it had ever been during the day. Through the lab's windows, we could see into the corridors. They were full of creatures now. Not just our 3 specimens, but dozens of others. They must have called their families, their packs, their tribes, and they were all looking at us. The intercom crackled to life. When the voice came through, it was Specimen A, the Sasquatch. But the words were clear, spoken in perfect English. "Your turn to be specimens now." The creatures didn't kill us right away. That would have been too simple. Instead, they turned Alpha 7 into exactly what it had always been, a research facility. Except now, we were the subjects. They moved us to the specimen containment area, the same cells where we'd kept them locked up for months. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Specimen A. I couldn't think of it as specimen anymore, not after hearing it speak. Personally escorted me to what used to be its cage. "You will be comfortable here," it said, in that deep, careful voice. "We have studied your care techniques extensively." The cage had been modified. A cot, a small desk, basic amenities. Everything we'd given the creatures, but sized for humans. They'd prepared for this. "How long have you been able to speak?" I asked. The Sasquatch, I decided to call him by what he truly was, tilted its massive head. "Always. We simply chose not to reveal this ability to you. We learned much by listening." Through the bars of my cell, I could see the other researchers in similar cages. Webb was across from me, Ramos, 2 cells down. The creatures had separated us just far enough to make communication difficult, but not impossible. They wanted us to be able to see each other, to know we were all trapped. What happened next was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced, and I'd been living in a facility full of monsters for 3 weeks. They studied us. Eve. Every day, teams of creatures would come to observe. They took notes, actual written notes in perfect English, about our behavior, our eating habits, our sleep patterns. They drew our blood for analysis. They ran psychological tests, showing us pictures and recording our responses. The worst part was how professional they were about it. Clinical. Detached. the same way we'd studied them. Fascinating, the dogman said on my third day of captivity. It was in its human form, wearing a white lab coat it had found somewhere. Your species shows remarkable stress responses when placed in captivity. Note the elevated cortisol levels in subject N7. That was me, subject N7. They'd given us all numbers. The irony is intentional, I assume, I said. Of course. The dogman made a note on its clipboard. We have spent considerable time studying your research methods. Your psychological approaches are quite instructive. The Fook monster, the massive creature that had terrified me from day one, turned out to be the most intelligent of them all. It had learned to operate the facility's computers and was analyzing all of our research data. Your breeding program was doomed to failure, it explained to Webb during one of the daily observation sessions. Human and cryptid genetics are incompatible for the reasons you intended. However, it paused, studying Webb with those burning eyes. They are compatible for other purposes. What do you mean? Webb asked. We have been evolving for centuries, hidden from your kind. But evolution is slow. Your research has provided us with shortcuts. That's when I understood the true horror of what they were doing. They weren't just studying us for revenge. They were learning from our techniques, our methods, our knowledge. They were using our own research against us to accelerate their development. On the 7th day of our captivity, they brought in new subjects. The military team that had come to check on the facility. 12 soldiers in full combat gear, all unconscious, all being wheeled in on gurneys like we had, transported the creatures months earlier. How did you... Webb started. The same tranquilizer compounds you used on us, the Sasquatch explained. We found the formulas in your files. Very effective. It took 19 darts to bring down the largest soldier, but eventually they all succumbed. The soldiers were placed in the remaining cells. When they woke up, the screaming started. Trained military personnel, reduced to panic and terror in a matter of hours. The creatures studied their reactions with the same clinical detachment they'd shown us. But I was beginning to understand that this wasn't random cruelty. The creatures had a plan. On day 10, the dogman came to my cell alone. It was in its human form, but I could see the wrongness in its joints, the way its legs bent at impossible angles beneath its stolen lab coat. You are different from the others, it said. How? You showed hesitation, doubt. We observed you arguing with Dr. Webb about the ethics of our treatment. You were listening to us argue? We hear everything in this facility, every conversation, every plan, every private moment of doubt. The creature leaned closer to the bars. You questioned what you were doing to us. The others did not. What does that mean? It means you have a choice. The others will remain here as permanent subjects. But you can carry a message. My heart raced. What message? Your species believes it is the dominant form of life on this planet. This facility has taught us that you are capable of great cruelty in service of that belief. But also, the dogman paused. You are capable of conscience, of recognizing when you have done wrong. What are you saying? We are returning to the forests, the mountains, the hidden places where your kind cannot find us. But we take with us everything we have learned here, your technologies, your methods, your weaknesses. The creature's eyes glowed in the dim light. Evolution has been accelerated. We are no longer the simple creatures you captured. And the message? Tell your people, the age of human dominance is ending. We were here first, and we remember everything. But if your species learns to respect rather than dominate, perhaps coexistence is possible. The creature turned to go, then stopped. Dr. Nightingale, Eleanor, what you did here was evil, but recognizing evil is the first step toward redemption. That night, they opened my cell. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, I was lying in my car on the side of a mountain road, 50 miles from where Alpha 7 had been. My head felt like someone had taken a hammer to it, and my memories were fuzzy, dreamlike. But the facility was gone. I drove back to the coordinates, following the same winding roads I'd taken months earlier. But instead of a government research station, I found only scorched earth and twisted metal. The official story was an industrial accident, a chemical leak that had poisoned the entire area. Hazmat crews were already setting up containment barriers. "You can't go in there, ma'am," a soldier told me. "Toxic contamination zone, very dangerous." I tried to tell them about the researchers, about Webb and Ramos and the others, but the soldier just looked at me with confusion. "There was never any facility here, ma'am. Just an old mining operation. Been closed for 20 years. The records had been scrubbed. Alpha 7 never existed. The researchers never existed." I began to doubt my own memories. Maybe it had all been a breakdown, a psychological episode brought on by too much stress and isolation. But then I found the note in my jacket pocket. Written in perfect English, in handwriting I recognized as Specimen A's, the Sasquatches, from the sign language lessons I'd watched. The Appalachians remain. They volunteered to stay and help us understand your species better. Do not look for them. They are safe and serving an important purpose. Remember what we discussed. Tell your people. The world is changing. Below that, a single line that made my blood freeze. "We know where you live, Eleanor. We know where all of you live." That was 47 years ago. I never returned to marine biology. Never married, never had children. How could I bring a child into a world where such things were possible? Instead, I became a librarian in a small town in Montana, far from any major forests. I kept my head down, lived quietly, and tried to forget. But they never let me forget completely. Every few years, I'd find something. A photo on my porch showing creatures moving through the woods behind my house. A newspaper clipping about hikers disappearing in national forests. A child's drawing slipped under my door, showing tall, hairy figures with two intelligent eyes. They're still out there, still watching, still learning. And they're not alone anymore. The stories have been increasing. Sasquatch sightings with unusual details, creatures using tools, displaying technology, communicating in human languages. Dogman encounters where the creatures seem to know personal details about their witnesses. Fook monster reports describing organized, tactical behavior. They took our research, our methods, our knowledge of human psychology and biology, and they've had 47 years to put it to use. Last week I found another note. Same handwriting, same careful English. "The experiment is complete. Phase 2 begins soon. Thank you for your contribution to science, Dr. Nightingale. Your species taught us much about the art of specimen collection." I'm telling this story now because I'm 84 years old, and I don't have much time left. Maybe no one will believe me. Maybe that's for the best. But if you're reading this, if you're a scientist or a researcher or just someone who thinks humans are the smartest things on this planet, remember what I learned at Alpha 7. We were never the ones conducting the experiment. We were always the specimens. And somewhere in the deep forests, in facilities we'll never find, the real researchers are still taking notes. My name is Marcus Coldwater. At least, that's who I used to be. I woke up in the snow and everything was wrong. My body felt different, bigger. When I tried to sit up, my arms looked like sticks covered in pale skin. My hands were huge, with fingers that seemed too long. I was naked and freezing, but somehow I didn't care about the cold. The trees around me looked familiar. I was in Daniel Boone National Forest near Cumberland Gap in Kentucky. I'd been here before for work. But how long had I been lying here? The last thing I remembered was being in my lab, looking at tissue samples under the microscope. That felt like yesterday. But the snow was deep and my beard had grown long and wild. My stomach cramped with a hunger I'd never felt before. Not just hungry for food, hungry for something else. Something that made my mouth water just thinking about it. I stood up slowly. I was tall now, really tall. At least 8 feet, maybe more. My legs were thin but strong. When I looked at my reflection in a frozen puddle, I barely recognized myself. My face was gaunt, my eyes were yellow, and my teeth looked sharper than before. Walking felt natural, even though my body was different. I moved through the forest like I belonged there. Every sound seemed louder. I could smell things from far away. The scent of deer, the smell of old campfires, and something else that made my stomach growl. Humans. I found my old research station after an hour of walking. The building was half collapsed, with broken windows and a door hanging off its hinges. Snow had blown inside, covering everything. My equipment was ruined, papers scattered everywhere. It looked like no one had been here in months. On my desk, under some ice, I found my last research notes. The pages were wet and hard to read, but I could make out enough. December 15th, 1963. That was the last entry. I'd been studying Wendigo, sightings in the area. The government had sent me here to figure out if the legends were real. I remembered now. The tissue sample. I'd found remains of something in a cave, something that looked human but wasn't. I'd taken it back to the lab to study it. But I'd been careless. A small cut on my finger, a tiny drop of blood mixing with the sample. That was 6 months ago. The hunger hit me again, stronger this time. My hands shook. I could smell people somewhere in the distance. Park rangers, maybe, or hikers. The smell made me drool. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and found my saliva was thick and dark. I tried to remember my old life, my wife Sarah, my daughter Emma. They lived in Lexington. Did they think I was dead? Had they moved on? The thought of them made the human part of me feel sad. But another part of me, the part that was growing stronger, only cared about the hunt. I had to find food, real food, the kind that walked on 2 legs and screamed. The smell led me through the forest. 3 people, maybe 4. They were close. My feet moved quietly through the snow, even though I was so tall. It was like my body knew how to hunt without me teaching it. I found them at a maintenance shed near the park road. 2 men in green uniforms, park workers. They were fixing a broken fence, talking and laughing about something. Steam rose from their coffee cups. They looked warm and alive and perfect. I hid behind a tree and watched them. The human part of me wanted to call out for help, to tell them I was Dr. Marcus Coldwater, that I needed to get to a hospital. But when I opened my mouth, only a low growl came out. One of the men looked up. "You hear that?" "Probably just a bear," the other one said. "They're waking up early this year." I stepped closer. A branch cracked under my foot. Both men turned toward my hiding spot. I could smell their fear now. Sweet and sharp. "Hello?" one of them called. "Someone there?" I wanted to answer, but my throat felt wrong, like it wasn't made for human words anymore. I tried to say help me, but what came out sounded like a hiss mixed with a roar. The men dropped their tools and backed toward their truck. Smart, they should run. I didn't want to hurt them. The old Marcus didn't want to hurt anyone, but the hunger was getting stronger. I stepped out from behind the tree. Both men went pale. One of them started praying in Spanish. The other one fumbled for a radio on his belt. "This is Jimmy at the North Gate," he said, his voice shaking. "We need help out here. There's something in the woods." I tried to wave my hands to show them I was friendly, but my movements were too quick, too sharp. To them, it probably looked like I was getting ready to attack. They ran. I followed without thinking. My legs carried me faster than any human could run. I caught up to them before they reached their truck. The hunger was screaming in my head now. My mouth was full of saliva that tasted like metal. The first man tripped and fell. I was on him before he could get up. The human part of me watched in horror as my hands grabbed him. The monster part of me felt only satisfaction. He screamed. I bit down. The taste was incredible, better than anything I'd ever eaten. Warm and rich and perfect. I couldn't stop. I ate until there was nothing left but bones and clothes. When it was over, I felt clear for the first time in months. The fog in my head lifted. I could think like a human again. I remembered my name, my work, my family. But I also remembered what I'd just done. I'd killed a man, eaten him, enjoyed it. The second park worker had made it to the truck. I could hear the engine starting up, tires spinning in the snow as he raced away to get help. Good. Someone should warn people about me. I looked down at what was left of my victim. A young guy, maybe 25. He'd had a wedding ring. Somewhere, a woman was waiting for him to come home. The guilt hit me like a punch to the stomach, but underneath it the hunger was already stirring again. Satisfied for now, but not gone, never gone. I dragged the remains into the woods and buried them deep in the snow. Then I went back to cover my tracks. I was good at hiding evidence now. Another thing my new body knew how to do. As I walked back to the ruins of my research station, I could hear sirens in the distance. Search teams would come looking. They'd find blood, but no body. They'd think it was a bear attack. I had maybe a few hours before they organized a real hunt. I needed to find shelter, somewhere safe to figure out what I'd become, and I needed to stay away from people, because now I knew the truth. I wasn't Marcus Coldwater anymore. I was the monster he'd been hunting. I found a cave system about 5 miles from my old research station, deep enough that humans wouldn't explore it, dark enough that I could hide during the day. The sunlight hurt my eyes now, made my skin feel like it was burning. For 3 weeks, I tried to fight the hunger. I ate deer, rabbits, anything I could catch, but animal meat tasted like ash in my mouth. It didn't satisfy the craving, only made it worse. I kept a journal on pieces of bark, using a sharp stone to scratch out words. I wanted to record what was happening to me. Maybe someone would find it someday and understand. Day 20. Haven't eaten human flesh in 3 weeks. Feel weak. Can barely think straight. The hunger is like fire in my stomach. Day 21. Found a family camping near Bear Creek. Watched them for hours. Father, mother, 2 small children. The smell almost drove me crazy. Had to run away before I did something terrible. Day 25. Killed a park ranger today. Couldn't help it. The hunger was too strong. I tried to warn her first, but she thought I was threatening her. Maybe I was. Her name was Patricia Stonefield. She'd been doing a routine patrol when she found my tracks. I'd tried to communicate to tell her to stay away, but my voice was just growls and hisses now. When I reached toward her, trying to show I was human inside, she pulled her gun. I didn't mean to hurt her, but when she shot me, something snapped. The bullets barely slowed me down. I moved faster than thought, faster than fear. Afterward, when the feeding frenzy ended, I found her ID card. Patricia Stonefield, 28 years old. She had a picture in her wallet, a little girl with her same smile. Her daughter, probably. I buried Patricia deep in the woods, like the others. Then I sat by her grave and cried. The first tears I'd shed since the transformation. They came out black and thick. More search teams came. Hunters with dogs and rifles. They were looking for a killer bear now. 3 people dead, no bodies found. The local news was calling it the most dangerous animal attack in Kentucky history. If only they knew. I watched them from the shadows. Good people, trying to protect their community. They had no idea they were hunting something that used to be one of them. Something that understood their tactics, their equipment, their weaknesses. I could have killed them all. The monster in me wanted to, but I fought it. Some days I won, some days I didn't. The 4th kill was a hiker who got lost during a snowstorm. He was hypothermic when I found him, probably would have died anyway. I told myself that made it better. It didn't. The 5th was a poacher who'd set illegal traps. He shot at me first. Self-defense, I tried to convince myself. But I knew the truth. I'd been stalking him for hours, waiting for the right moment. Each time I fed, the human part of me got smaller. The guilt got easier to ignore. I was forgetting things. My wife's laugh, my daughter's favorite bedtime story, the taste of coffee in the morning. I was becoming more monster and less man with every kill. But I was also getting smarter about the hunt. I learned to pick victims who wouldn't be missed right away. Drifters, criminals, people camping, alone in remote areas. I got better at hiding the evidence. The authorities were still blaming bear attacks. Then, one night in early April, everything changed. I was hunting near the old logging road when I caught a familiar scent. Patricia Stonefield's perfume, but that was impossible. I'd killed her months ago. I followed the smell and found a woman setting up a tent by the creek. In the moonlight, she looked exactly like Patricia. Same height, same build, same way of moving, but when she turned around, I saw it wasn't her. It was her sister. Had to be. The resemblance was too strong to be a coincidence. She was armed, professional equipment, not a camper or a hiker, someone who'd come here specifically to hunt me. "I know you're out there," she called into the darkness. "Patricia told me about you before she died. She got one good look before you killed her." My blood went cold. Patricia had survived long enough to report me, but that meant... She said you tried to talk to her, said you looked almost human, but bigger. Wrong. The woman pulled out a small device. A recording of Patricia's voice filled the night air. "It's not an animal, Jenny. It's something else. Something that thinks." When it reached for me, I could see intelligence in its eyes, like it was trying to tell me something. Jenny, Patricia's sister. She'd come for revenge. She also said you seemed to recognize your own name when she called you Dr. Coldwater. She knew who I was, who I used to be. "I've read your research files, Marcus. I know what you were studying out here. I know about the tissue samples, and I think I know what happened to you." I stepped out of the shadows. Jenny raised her rifle but didn't fire. Smart woman. If she'd wanted to kill me, she would have done it already. "Hello, Dr. Marcus Coldwater," she said. "My name is Jennifer Stonefield. I think we need to talk." Jenny back, dead away as I approached, but she kept her rifle lowered. She was scared. I could smell it on her, but she was also determined, like her sister had been. "Stay back," she said, "but not too far. I want to see you clearly." I stopped about 10 feet away. In the moonlight, she could see everything. My 8-foot frame, my pale, stretched skin, my yellow eyes and sharp teeth. I was a monster, and we both knew it. "Patricia was right," Jenny whispered. "You are trying to communicate." I nodded slowly. Then I opened my mouth and forced out words. It hurt, but I could do it if I concentrated. I was human. "Dr. Marcus Coldwater, cryptozoologist. You were studying Wendigo sightings for the government." Another nod. "Accident. Ineffication. You infected yourself with Wendigo tissue?" "Yes." The word came out as a hiss. "Trying to cure myself." Jenny's grip on her rifle tightened. "By killing innocent people?" The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I dropped to my knees in the snow. "Can't stop hunger." "How many?" I held up both hands. Fingers spread, then 3 more fingers. 13 people? Jenny's voice cracked. 13 families destroyed? I wanted to explain, to tell her about the months of fighting it, about the pain when I didn't feed, about how I tried to choose victims who deserved it. But the words wouldn't come. "Patricia was investigating the disappearances," Jenny said. "She volunteered for patrol duty out here because she thought she could solve it. She wanted to protect people." I remembered Patricia's last moments, how she'd drawn her gun when she saw me, how I'd tried to warn her to stay away, how it had all gone wrong. "She had a daughter," Jenny continued. "Sophie, 8 years old, keeps asking when Mommy's coming home." The black tears started again. Sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back." Jenny was right. Nothing could fix what I'd done. But maybe I could stop it from getting worse. "Kill me," I said. "Please." I thought about it, spent months planning how to hunt you down. But then I read more of your research, about the government project, about the other test subjects. Other test subjects? What? Others? You weren't the only one, Marcus. There were 12 researchers working on Project Wendigo, all of them given infected tissue to study. The official reports say there was a containment failure. All 12 died in the lab explosion. That was a lie. I remembered the explosion, but it had happened after my escape, after I'd already been transformed for weeks. But I found classified files. 11 bodies were recovered from the lab. You were the 12th. They've been hunting you ever since. My blood went cold. The government was still after me? They want to capture you, not kill you. You're a successful test subject. Proof that the project worked. Worked? I laughed, a horrible sound. I'm monster. You're a weapon. Something they can control and deploy against enemies. They've been tracking the kills, studying your behavior. They think they can find a way to direct your hunger. The sound of helicopter blades cut through the night air. Far away, but getting closer. Jenny heard it too. They're coming, she said. I led them here. I felt betrayed, but then I realized the truth. You work for them. I work for the FBI, but not for this project. I came here to stop them, to make sure what they did to you never happens to anyone else. The helicopters were getting louder. Spotlights swept through the trees, men's voices calling out coordinates. A full extraction team. They'll take you back to the lab, Jenny said. Study you. Try to replicate the process. Create more like you. The thought of other people going through what I'd experienced made me sick. Other families destroyed. Other monsters set loose on the world. Stop them, I said. I can't, not alone, but you can. She was right. I was stronger than any human now. Faster. Better at killing. If I fought the extraction team, some of them would die. But maybe that would be enough to expose the project. Will you help me? Jenny asked. Will you fight them? I thought. About Patricia. About her daughter Sophie, waiting for a mother who would never come home. About the 13 families I'd destroyed. About all the people who would die if the government succeeded in creating more monsters. Yes, I said. I'll fight. The helicopters circled overhead. Ropes dropped from the sky. Black-clad soldiers slid down into the clearing. They had tranquilizer guns, nets, and restraints. They'd come to take me alive. I looked at Jenny one last time. Tell Sophie, her mother, was brave. Then I charged into battle. The soldiers were professionals, but they'd never fought anything like me. I moved through their formation like smoke, too fast for their tranquilizer darts, too strong for their nets. I didn't want to kill them. These were just soldiers following orders. But when the first one put his hands on Jenny, something inside me snapped. The hunger took over. When it was finished, 7 soldiers were dead. The rest had retreated to the helicopters. Jenny stood in the middle of the carnage, her rifle smoking from the shots she'd fired to help me. It's over, she said. They'll never try this again. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence. I felt empty. Not satisfied like after a normal feeding. Just tired. The human part of me was almost gone now. I could feel it slipping away with each heartbeat. Marcus? Jenny stepped closer. Are you still in there? I tried to answer, but only a growl came out. The words were gone. The guilt was fading too. Soon there would be nothing left but hunger and instinct. Jenny understood. She raised her rifle one final time. Thank you, she whispered. For fighting them. For trying to stay human. I closed my eyes and thought about Sarah and Emma. About the life I'd lost. About the man I used to be before the experiment destroyed everything. The shot echoed through the forest.